Chapter 1 of The Money Moon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Leader. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 1. To Jennifer, the one and only, whose unswerving faith was an inspiration, whose generosity is a byword, this book is dedicated as a mark of gratitude and affection. Geoffrey Farnell, February 10, 1910. Chapter 1, which, being the first, is very properly the shortest chapter in the book. When Sylvia Marchmont went to Europe, George Bellew, being, at the same time, desirous of testing his newest acquired yacht, followed her, and mutual friends in New York, Newport, and elsewhere, confidently awaited news of their engagement. Great, therefore, was their surprise when they learnt of her approaching marriage to the Duke of Ryde. Bellew, being young and rich, had many friends, very naturally, who, while they sympathized with his loss, yet agreed among themselves that, despite Bellew's millions, Sylvia had done vastly well for herself, seeing that a duke is always a duke, especially in America. There were, also, divers ladies in New York, Newport, and elsewhere, and celebrated for their palatial homes, their jewels, and their daughters, who were anxious to know how Bellew would comport himself under his disappointment. Some leaned to the idea that he would immediately blow his brains out. Others opined that he would promptly set off on another of his exploring expeditions, and get himself torn to pieces by lions and tigers, or devoured by alligators; while others, again, feared greatly that, in a fit of pique, he would marry some young person unknown, and therefore, of course, utterly unworthy. How far these worthy ladies were right, or wrong, in their surmises, they who take the trouble to turn the following pages shall find out. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 2. How George Bellew sought counsel of his valet. The first intimation Bellew received of the futility of his hopes was the following letter which he received one morning as he sat at breakfast in his chambers at St. James Street, W. My dear George, I am writing to tell you that I like you so much that I am quite sure I could never marry you. It would be too ridiculous. Liking, you see, George, is not love, is it? Though, personally, I think all that sort of thing went out of fashion with our great-grandmother's hoops and crinolines. So, George, I have decided to marry the Duke of Ryde. The ceremony will take place in 3 weeks' time at St. George's, Hanover Square, and everyone will be there, of course. If you care to come too, so much the better. I won't say that I hope you will forget me, because I don't. But I am sure you will find someone to console you, because you are such a dear fellow, and so ridiculously rich. So, good-bye, and best wishes. Ever yours most sincerely, Sylvia. Now, under such circumstances, had Bellew sought oblivion and consolation from bottles, or gone headlong to the devil in any of other numerous ways that are more or less inviting, deluded people would have pitied him, and shaken grave heads over him. For it seems that disappointment, more especially in love, may condone many offences, and cover as many sins as charity. But Bellew, knowing nothing of that latter-day hysteria which wears the disguise and calls itself temperament, and being only a rather ordinary young man, did nothing of the kind. Having lighted his pipe, and read the letter through again, he rang instead for Baxter, his valet. Baxter was small, and slight, and dapper, as to person, clean-shaven, alert of eye, and soft of movement. In a word, Baxter was the cream of gentlemen's gentlemen, and the very acme of what a valet should be, from the very precise parting of his glossy hair, to the trim toes of his glossy boots. Baxter, as has been said, was his valet, and had been his father's valet before him, and as to age, might have been 30, or 40, or 50,
as he stood there beside the table, with one eyebrow raised a trifle higher than the other, waiting for Bellew to speak. "Baxter, sir, take a seat. Thank you, sir." And Baxter sat down, not too near his master, nor too far off, but exactly at the right and proper distance. "Baxter, I wish to consult with you. As between master and servant, sir. As between man and man, Baxter. Very good, Mr. George, sir. I should like to hear your opinion, Baxter, as to what is the proper and most accredited course to adopt when one has been crossed in love." "Why, sir," said Baxter, slightly wrinkling his smooth brow, "so far as I can call to mind, the courses usually adopted by despairing lovers are, in number, 4. "Name them, Baxter." "First, Mr. George, there is what I may term the course retaliatory, which is marriage."
"Marriage?"
"With another party, sir, on the principle that there are as good fish in the sea as ever came out, and pebbles on beaches, sir. You understand me, sir?" "Perfectly, go on." "Secondly, there is the army, sir. I have known of a good many enlistments on account of blighted affections, Mr. George, sir. Indeed, the army is very popular."
"Ah?"
said Bellew, settling the tobacco in his pipe with the aid of the salt spoon. "Proceed, Baxter." "Thirdly, Mr. George, there are those who are content to merely disappear." said Bellew. "And lastly, sir, though it is usually the first, there is dissipation, Mr. George. Drink, sir, the consolation of bottles, and—" "Exactly!" nodded Bellew. "Now, Baxter," he pursued, beginning to draw diagrams on the tablecloth with the salt spoon, "knowing me as you do, what course would you advise me to adopt?" "You mean, Mr. George, speaking as between man and man, of course, you mean that you are in the unfortunate position of being crossed in your affections, sir? Also broken hearted, Baxter?" "Certainly, sir. Miss Marchmont marries the Duke of Ryde in 3 weeks, Baxter." "Indeed, sir! You were, I believe, aware of the fact that Miss Marchmont and I were as good as engaged?" "I had gathered as much, sir." "Then, confound it all, Baxter, why aren't you surprised?" "I am quite overcome, sir," said Baxter, stooping to recover the salt spoon which had slipped to the floor. "Consequently," pursued Bellew, "I am broken hearted, as I told you." "Certainly, sir." "Crushed, despondent, and utterly hopeless, Baxter, and shall be, henceforth, pursued by the haunting spectre of the might have been." "Very natural, sir, indeed." "I could have hoped, Baxter, that having served me so long, not to mention my father, you would have shown just a shade more feeling in the matter." "And if you were to ask me, as between man and man, sir, why I don't show more feeling, then, speaking as the old servant of your respected father, Master George, sir, I should beg most respectfully to say that regarding the lady in question, her conduct is not in the least surprising, Miss Marchmont being a beauty and aware of the fact, Master George. Referring to your heart, sir, I am ready to swear that it is not even cracked. Now, sir, what clothes do you propose to wear this morning? And pray, why should you be so confident of regarding the condition of my heart?" "Because, sir, speaking as your father's old servant, Master George, I make bold to say that I don't believe that you have ever been in love, or even known what love is, Master George, sir." Bellew picked up the salt spoon, balanced it very carefully upon his finger, and put it down again. "Nevertheless," said he, shaking his head, I can see for myself but the dreary perspective of a hopeless future, Baxter, blasted by the haunting spectre of the might have been. I'll trouble you to push the cigarettes a little nearer. And now, sir, said Baxter as he rose to strike and apply the necessary match, what suit will you wear today? Something in tweeds. Tweeds, sir? Surely you forget your appointment with the Lady Cecily Prynne and her party? Lord Montclair had me on the telephone last night. Also a good heavy walking stick, Baxter, and a knapsack. A knapsack, sir? I shall set out on a walking tour in an hour's time. Certainly, sir. Where to, sir? I haven't the least idea, Baxter, but I'm going, in an hour. On the whole, of the 4 courses you described for one whose life is blighted, whose heart, I say whose heart, Baxter, is broken, utterly smashed, and, shivered beyond repair, I prefer to disappear. In an hour, Baxter. Shall you drive the touring car, sir, or the new racer? I shall walk, Baxter, alone, in an hour. End of chapter 2.
Chapter 3 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, A Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 3, which concerns itself with a hay-cart and a belligerent wagoner. It was upon a certain August morning that George Bellew shook the dust of London from his feet, and, leaving chance, or destiny, to direct him, followed a haphazard course, careless alike of how, or when, or where, sighing as often and as heavily as he considered his heart-broken condition required, which was very often and very heavily, yet heeding, for all that, the glory of the sun, and the stir and bustle of the streets about him. Thus it was that, being careless of his ultimate destination, Fortune condescended to take him under her wing, if she has one, and guided his steps across the river into the lovely land of Kent, that county of gentle hills and broad, pleasant valleys, of winding streams and shady woods, of rich meadows and smiling pastures, of grassy lanes and fragrant hedgerows, that most delightful land which has been called, and very rightly, the Garden of England. It was thus, as has been said, upon a fair August morning, that Bellew set out on what he termed a walking tour. The reservation is necessary because Bellew's idea of a walking tour is original and quaint. He began very well, for Bellew. In the morning he walked very nearly 5 miles, and in the afternoon, before he was discovered, he accomplished 10 more, on a hay-cart that happened to be going in his direction. He had swung himself up among the hay, unobserved by the somnolent driver, and had ridden thus an hour or more in that delicious state between waking and sleeping, ere the wagoner discovered him, whereupon ensued the following colloquy. The wagoner, indignantly: "Hullo there! What might ye be a-doing in my hay?" Bellew, drowsily: "Enjoying myself immensely." The wagoner, growling: "Well, you get out of that, and sharp about it." Bellew, yawning: "Not on your life. No, sir. Not for Cadwallader and all his goats." The wagoner: "You just get down out of my hay, now come." Bellew, sleepily: "Enough, good fellow, go to. Thy voice offends mine ear." The wagoner, threateningly: "Ear be blowed! If you don't get down out of my hay, I'll come and throw you out." Bellew, drowsily: "'Twould be an act of wanton aggression that likes me not." The wagoner, dubiously: "Where be you going?" Bellew: "Wherever you like to take me. Thy way shall be my way, and, thy people—" So, Drive on, my rustic Jehu, and heaven's blessings prosper thee." Saying which, Bellew closed his eyes again, sighed plaintively, and once more composed himself to slumber. But to drive on, the Waggoner, very evidently, had no mind. Instead, flinging the reins upon the backs of his horses, he climbed down from his seat, and, spitting on his hands, clenched them into fists, and shook them up at the yawning Bellew, one after the other. "It be enough," said he, "to raise the old Adam inside of me to have a trapper o' the roads a-snoring in my hay, but I ain't a-going to be called names into the bargain. Rusty I may be, but I reckon I'm good enough for the likes o' you, so come on down." And the Waggoner shook his fists again. He was a very square man, was this Waggoner, square of head, square of jaw, and square of body, with twinkling blue eyes and a pleasant, good-natured face. But just now the eyes gleamed, and the face was set grimly, and altogether he looked a very ugly opponent. Therefore Bellew sighed again, stretched himself, and, very reluctantly, climbed down out of the hay. No sooner was he fairly in the road, than the Waggoner went for him with a rush, and a whirl of knotted fists. It was very dusty in that particular spot, so that it presently rose in a cloud, in the midst of which the battle raged fast and furious. And, in a while, the Waggoner, rising out of the ditch, grinned to see Bellew wiping blood from his face. "You be no fool," panted the Waggoner, mopping his face with the end of his neckerchief. "Leastways, not with your fists." "Why, you are pretty good yourself, if it comes to that," returned Bellew, mopping in his turn. Thus they stood a while, staunching their wounds, and gazing upon each other with a mutual and growing respect. "Well," inquired Bellew, when he had recovered his breath somewhat, "shall we begin again, or do you think we have had enough? To be sure, I begin to feel much better for your efforts. You see, exercise is what I most need just now, on account of the, haunting spectre of the might-have-been, to offset its effect, you know. But it is uncomfortably warm work here, in the sun, isn't it?" "Ah," nodded the Waggoner, "it be." "Then suppose we, continue on our journey," said Bellew, with his dreamy gaze upon the tempting load of sweet-smelling hay. "Ah," nodded the Waggoner again, beginning to roll down his sleeves, "suppose we do. I aren't above giving a lift to a chap as can use his fists, not even if he is a vagrant, and an uncommon dusty one at that. So if you're in the same mind about it, up you get, but no more furrin curses, mind." With which admonition the Waggoner nodded, grinned, and climbed back to his seat, while Bellew swung himself up into the hay once more. "Friend," said he, as the wagon creaked upon its way, "do you smoke?" "Ah," nodded the Waggoner, "then here are 3 cigars which you didn't manage to smash just now." "Cigars! Why, it ain't often as I gets so far as a cigar, unless it be squire or passon." "Cigars, eh?" Saying which the Waggoner turned and accepted the cigars, which he proceeded to stow away in the cavernous interior of his wide-eaved hat, handling them with elaborate care, rather as if they were explosives of a highly dangerous kind. Meanwhile, George Bellew, American citizen and millionaire, lay upon the broad of his back, staring up at the cloudless blue above, and despite heartbreak and a certain haunting shadow, felt singularly content, which feeling he was at some pains with himself to account for. "It is the exercise," said he, speaking his thought aloud, as he stretched luxuriously upon his soft and fragrant couch. "After all, there is nothing like a little exercise." "That's what they all say," nodded the Waggoner, "but I notices them as says it ain't over fond of doing of it. They mostly prefers to lie on their backs and talk about it, like yourself." "Hum," said Bellew. "Ha! Some are born to exercise, some achieve exercise, and some, like myself, have exercise thrust upon them. But anyway, it is a very excellent thing, more especially if one is affected with a broken heart."
"A what?"
inquired the Wagoner. "Blighted affections, then," sighed Bellew, settling himself more comfortably in the hay.
"You aren't gettin' at love, are ye?"
inquired the Wagoner, cocking a somewhat sheepish eye at him. "I was, but just at present," and here Bellew lowered his voice. "It is a rather painful subject with me. Let us therefore talk of something else."
"You don't mean to say as your heart's broke, do ye?"
inquired the Wagoner in a tone of such vast surprise and disbelief that Bellew turned and propped himself on an indignant elbow.
"And why the deuce not?"
he retorted. "My heart is no more impervious than anyone else's, confound it."
"But," said the Wagoner, "you ain't got the look of a heart-broke cove, no more than Squire Cassilis, which the same I heard telling Miss Anthea as his heart were broke, no later than yesterday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as ever was."
"Anthea," repeated Bellew, blinking drowsily up at the sky again. "That is a very quaint name, and very pretty."
"Pretty, ah, and so's Miss Anthea, as a picter."
"Oh, really?" yawned Bellew.
"Ah," nodded the Wagoner, "there ain't a man in or out of the parish from Squire down as don't think the very same."
But here, the Wagoner's voice tailed off into a meaningless drone that became merged with the creaking of the wheels, the plodding hoof-strokes of the horses, and Bellew fell asleep. He was awakened by feeling himself shaken lustily, and, sitting up, saw that they had come to where a narrow lane branched off from the high road, and wound away between great trees.
"Yon's your way,"
nodded the Wagoner, pointing along the high road.
"Dapplemere village lies over yonder, 'bout a mile."
"Thank you very much," said Bellew, "but I don't want the village."
"No?"
inquired the Wagoner, scratching his head.
"Certainly not,"
answered Bellew.
"Then what do you want?"
"Oh, well, I'll just go on lying here, and see what turns up.
So drive on like the good fellow you are."
"Can't be done," said the Wagoner.
"Why not?"
"Why, since you ax me, because I don't have to drive no farther. There be the farmhouse, over the upland yonder. You can't see it because of the trees, but there it be." So Bellew sighed resignedly, and perforce climbed down into the road. "What do I owe you?" he inquired.
"Owe me?"
said the Wagoner, staring. "For the ride, and the, very necessary exercise you afforded me."
"Lord!"
cried the Wagoner with a sudden great laugh.
"You don't owe me nothin' for that nohow. I owe you one for a knockin' of me into that ditch back yonder, though, to be sure, I did give you one or two good uns, didn't I?"
"You certainly did," answered Bellew, smiling, and he held out his hand.
"Hey, what be this?"
cried the Wagoner, staring down at the bright 5-shilling piece in his palm. "Well, I rather think it's 5 shillings," said Bellew. "It's big enough, heaven knows. English money is all O.K., I suppose, but it's confoundedly confusing, and rather heavy to drag around if you happen to have enough of it."
"Ah!"
nodded the Wagoner. "But then nobody never has enough of it. Leastways, I never knowed nobody as had. Good-bye, sir, and thank ye, and good luck." Saying which, the Wagoner chirruped to his horses, slipped the coin into his pocket, nodded, and the wagon creaked and rumbled up the lane. Bellew strolled along the road, breathing an air fragrant with honeysuckle from the hedges, and full of the song of birds, pausing, now and then, to listen to the blithe carol of a skylark, or the rich, sweet notes of a blackbird, and feeling that it was indeed good to be alive, so that, what with all this, the springy turf beneath his feet and the blue expanse overhead, he began to whistle for very joy of it, until, remembering the haunting shadow of the might-have-been, he checked himself, and sighed instead. Presently, Turning from the road, he climbed a stile, and followed a narrow path that led away across the meadows, and, as he went, there met him a gentle wind, laden with the sweet, warm scent of ripening hops and fruit. On he went, and on, heedless of his direction, until the sun grew low, and he grew hungry. Wherefore, looking about, he presently espied a nook sheltered from the sun's level rays by a steep bank where flowers bloomed and ferns grew. Here he sat down, unslinging his knapsack, and here it was also that he first encountered Small Porges. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 4. How Small Porges, in looking for a fortune for another, found an uncle for himself instead. The meeting of George Bellew and Small Porges, as he afterward came to be called, was sudden, precipitate, and wholly unexpected, and it befell on this wise. Bellew had opened his knapsack, had fished thence cheese, clasp-knife, and a crusty loaf of bread, and having exerted himself so far, had fallen a-thinking or a-dreaming in his characteristic attitude, i.e., on the flat of his back, when he was aware of a crash in the hedge above, and then of something that hurtled past him, all arms and legs, that rolled over 2 or 3 times, and eventually brought up in a sitting posture. And, lifting a lazy head, Bellew observed that it was a boy. He was a very diminutive boy with a round head covered with coppery curls, the boy who stared at Bellew out of a pair of very round, blue eyes, while he tenderly cherished a knee and an elbow. He had been on the brink of tears for a moment, but meeting Bellew's quizzical gaze, he manfully repressed the weakness, and, lifting the small and somewhat weather-beaten cap that found a precarious perch at the back of his curly head, he gravely wished Bellew "Good afternoon." "Well met, my Lord Chesterfield," nodded Bellew, returning the salute. "Are you hurt?"
"Just a bit, on the elbow, but my name's George."
"Why, so is mine," said Bellew.
"Though they call me Georgy Porgy."
"Of course they do," nodded Bellew. "They used to call me the same, once upon a time." Georgy Porgy, Pudding and Pie, kissed the girls and made them cry, though I never did anything of the kind. One doesn't do that sort of thing when one is young, and wise, that comes later, and brings its own care and, heartbreak. Here Bellew sighed, and hacked a piece from the loaf with the clasp-knife. "Are you hungry, Georgy Porgy?" he inquired, glancing up at the boy who had risen and was removing some of the soil and dust from his small person with his cap.
"Yes, I am."
"Then here is bread, and cheese, and bottled stout, so fall to, good comrade."
"Thank you, but I've got a piece of bread and jam in my bundle."
"Bundle?"
"I dropped it as I came through the hedge. I'll get it."
And as he spoke he turned, and climbing up the bank, presently came back with a very small bundle that dangled from the end of a very long stick, and, seating himself beside Bellew, he proceeded to open it. There, sure enough, was the bread and jam in question, seemingly a little the worse for wear and tear, for Bellew observed various articles adhering to it, amongst other things a battered penknife and a top. These, however, were readily removed, and Georgy Porgy fell to with excellent appetite. "And pray," inquired Bellew, after they had munched silently together some while, "pray where might you be going?"
"I don't know yet,"
answered Georgy Porgy with a shake of his curls. "Good again!" exclaimed Bellew, "neither do I."
"Though I've been thinking of Africa,"
continued his diminutive companion, turning the remains of the bread and jam over and over thoughtfully. "Africa!" repeated Bellew, staring. "That's quite a goodish step from here."
"Yes,"
sighed Georgy Porgy.
"but you see, there's gold there. Oh, lots of it. They dig it out of the ground with shovels, you know. Old Adam told me about it, and it's gold I'm looking for, you see. I'm trying to find a fortune."
"I beg your pardon?" said Bellew.
money, you know.
Explained Georgie Porgy with a patient sigh.
Pounds and shillings and banknotes, in a sack if I can get them.
And what does such a very small Georgie Porgy want so much money for?
Well, it's for my auntie, you know, so she won't have to sell her house and go away from Dapplemere. She was telling me last night when I was in bed. She always comes to tuck me up, you know. And she told me she was afraid we'd have to sell Dapplemere and go to live somewhere else. So I asked why, and she said 'cause she hadn't any money, and, oh, Georgie, she said, oh, Georgie, if we could only find enough money to pay off the...
Mortgage? Suggested Bellew at a venture.
Yes, that's it. But how did you know?
Never mind how. Go on with your tale, Georgie Porgy.
If we could only find enough money, or somebody would leave us a fortune, she said. And she was crying too, 'cause I felt a tear fall on me, you know. So this morning, I got up awful early, and made myself a bundle on a stick, like Dick Whittington had when he left home, and I started off to find a fortune.
I see, nodded Bellew.
But I haven't found anything, yet,
said Georgie Porgy with a long sigh.
I suppose money takes a lot of looking for, doesn't it?
Sometimes, Bellew answered. And do you live alone with your auntie then, Georgie Porgy?
Yes. Most boys live with their mothers, but that's where I'm different. I don't need one, 'cause I've got my Auntie Anthea.
Anthea? Repeated Bellew thoughtfully. Hereupon they fell silent, Bellew watching the smoke curl up from his pipe into the warm, still air, and Georgie Porgy watching him with very thoughtful eyes and a somewhat troubled brow, as if turning over some weighty matter in his mind. At last he spoke.
Please,
said he with a sudden diffidence.
Where do you live?
Live? Repeated Bellew, smiling. Under my hat. Here, there, and everywhere, which means nowhere in particular.
But, I mean, where is your home?
My home? Said Bellew, exhaling a great cloud of smoke. My home lies beyond the bounding billow.
That sounds an awful long way off.
It is an awful long way off.
And where do you sleep while you're here?
Anywhere they'll let me. Tonight I shall sleep at some inn, I suppose, if I can find one. If not, under a hedge or hayrick.
Oh, haven't you got any home of your own, then, here?
No.
And you're not going home just yet? I mean, across the bounding billow?
Not yet.
Then, please...
The small boy's voice was suddenly tremulous and eager, and he laid a little grimy hand upon Bellew's sleeve.
Please, if it isn't too much trouble, would you mind coming with me to help me to find the fortune? You see, you are so very big and... Oh, will you please?
George Bellew sat up suddenly and smiled. Bellew's smile was at all times wonderfully pleasant to see. At least the boy thought so. Georgie Porgy, said he, you can just bet your small life I will. And there's my hand on it, old chap. Bellew's lips were solemn now, but all the best of his smile seemed somehow to have got into his grey eyes. So the big hand clasped the small one, and as they looked at each other, there sprang up a certain understanding that was to be an enduring bond between them. I think, said Bellew as he lay and puffed at his pipe again, I think I'll call you Porges. It's shorter, easier, and I think altogether apt. I'll be Big Porges, and you shall be Small Porges. What do you say?
Yes, it's lots better than Georgie Porgy,
nodded the boy, and so Small Porges he became thenceforth. But, said he, after a thoughtful pause,
I think, if you don't mind, I'd rather call you Uncle Porges. You see, Dick Bennet, the blacksmith's boy, has 3 nephews, and I've only got a single aunt. So, if you don't mind...
Uncle Porges it shall be, now and forever, amen, murmured Bellew.
And when do you suppose we'd better start?
Inquired Small Porges, beginning to retie his bundle. Start where, nephew?
To find the fortune.
Said Bellew.
If we could manage to find some, even if it was only a very little, it would cheer her up so.
"To be sure it would," said Bellew, and sitting up, he pitched loaf, cheese, and clasp knife back into the knapsack, fastened it, slung it upon his shoulders, and, rising, took up his stick. "Come on, my Porges," said he, "and whatever you do, keep your weather eye on your uncle."
Where do you suppose we'd better look first?
inquired Small Porges eagerly. "Why, first I think we'd better find your Auntie Anthea,"
But...
began Porges, his face falling. "Buts me no buts, my Porges," smiled Bellew, laying his hand upon his new-found nephew's shoulder. "Buts me no buts, boy, and as I said before, just keep your eye on your uncle." End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 5. How Bellew Came to Arcadia. So they set out together, Big Porges and Small Porges, walking side by side over sun-kissed field and meadow, slowly and thoughtfully, to be sure, for Bellew disliked hurry, often pausing to listen to the music of running waters, or to stare away across the purple valley, for the sun was getting low. And ever as they went, they talked to one another wholeheartedly, as good friends should. And from the boy's eager lips, Bellew heard much of Auntie Anthea, and learned, little by little, something of the brave fight she had made, lonely and unaided, and burdened with ancient debt, to make the farm of Dapplemere pay. Likewise, Small Porges spoke learnedly of the condition of the markets, and of the distressing fall in prices in regard to hay and wheat.
"Oh, Adam, he's our man, you know. He says that farming isn't what it was in his young days, especially if you happen to be a woman, like my Auntie Anthea, and he told me yesterday that if you were Auntie, he'd give up trying, and take Mr. Cassilis at his word."
Cassilis? Ah, and who is Mr. Cassilis?
"He lives at Brampton Court, a great big house, 'bout a mile from Dapplemere, and he's always asking my Auntie to marry him, but of course she won't, you know."
"Why not?"
"Well, I think it's 'cause he's got such big white teeth when he smiles, and he's always smiling, you know. But old Adam says that if he'd been born a woman, he'd marry a man all teeth or no teeth at all, if he had as much money as Mr. Cassilis."
The sun was low in the west as, skirting a wood, they came out upon a grassy lane that presently led them into the great broad highway. Now, as they trudged along together, Small Porges, with one hand clasped in Bellew's, and the other supporting the bundle on his shoulder, there appeared, galloping towards them, a man on a fine black horse, at sight of whom Porges's clasp tightened, and he drew nearer to Bellew's side. When he was nearly abreast of them, the horseman checked his career so suddenly that his animal was thrown back on his haunches. "Why, Georgy!" he exclaimed.
"Good evening, Mr. Cassilis," said Small Porges, lifting his cap.
Mr. Cassilis was tall, handsome, well-built, and very particular as to dress. Bellew noticed that his teeth were indeed very large and white, beneath the small, carefully trained mustache. Also his eyes seemed just a trifle too close together, perhaps. "Why, what in the world have you been up to, boy?" he inquired, regarding Bellew with no very friendly eye. "Your aunt is worrying herself ill on your account. What have you been doing with yourself all day?" Again Bellew felt the small fingers tighten round his, and the small figure shrink a little closer to him, as Small Porges answered,
"I've been with Uncle Porges, Mr. Cassilis."
"With whom?" demanded Mr. Cassilis more sharply. "With his Uncle Porges, sir," Bellew rejoined, "a trustworthy person and very much at your service." Mr. Cassilis stared, his hand began to stroke and caress his small, black mustache, and he viewed Bellew from his dusty boots up to the crown of his dusty hat, and down again with supercilious eyes. "Uncle?" he repeated incredulously. "Porges," nodded Bellew. "I wasn't aware," began Mr. Cassilis, "that, George was so very fortunate." baptismal name, George," continued Bellew, "lately of New York, Newport, and, other places in America, USA, at present of nowhere in particular." "Ah!" said Mr. Cassilis, his eyes seeming to grow a trifle nearer together, "an American uncle! Still I was not aware of even that relationship." "It is a singularly pleasing thought," smiled Bellew, "to know that we may learn something every day, that one never knows what the day may bring forth. Tomorrow, for instance, you also may find yourself a nephew, somewhere or other, though personally I doubt it. Yes, I greatly doubt it. Still, one never knows, you know, and while there's life, there's hope. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Come, nephew mine, the evening falls apace, and I grow a-weary. Let us on. Excelsior!" Mr. Cassilis's cheek grew suddenly red. He twirled his moustache angrily, and seemed about to speak. Then he smiled instead, and, turning his horse, spurred him savagely, and galloped back down the road in a cloud of dust.
Did you see his teeth, Uncle Porges?
"I did,"
He only smiles like that when he's awful angry,"
said Small Porges, shaking his head as the galloping hoof-strokes died away in the distance.
"And what do you suppose he went back for?"
"Well, Porges, it's in my mind that he has gone back to warn our Auntie Anthea of our coming." Small Porges sighed, and his feet dragged in the dust. "Tired, my Porges?"
"Just a bit, you know, but it isn't that. I was thinking that the day has almost gone, and I haven't found a bit of the fortune yet."
"Why, there's always tomorrow to live for, my Porges."
"Yes, of course, there's always tomorrow, and then I did find you, you know, Uncle Porges."
"To be sure you did, and an uncle is better than nothing at all, isn't he? Even if he is rather dusty and disreputable of exterior. One doesn't find an uncle every day of one's life, my Porges, no sir."
"And you are so nice and big, you know,"
said Porges, viewing Bellew with a bright, approving eye. "Long would be a better word, perhaps," suggested Bellew, smiling down at him.
"And wide, too,"
nodded Small Porges. And from these two facts he seemed to derive a deal of solid comfort and satisfaction, for he strode on manfully once more. Leaving the high road, he guided Bellew by divers winding paths, through cornfields and other stiles, until, at length, they were come to an orchard. Such an orchard as surely may only be found in Kent, where great apple trees, gnarled and knotted, shot out huge branches that seemed to twist and writhe, where were stately pear trees, where peaches and apricots ripened against time-worn walls whose red bricks still glowed rosily for all their years, where the air was sweet with the scent of fruit, and fragrant with thyme, and sage, and marjoram, and where the blackbirds, bold marauders that they are, piped gloriously all day long. In the midst of this orchard they stopped, and Small Porges rested one hand against the rugged bole of a great old apple tree.
"This,"
said he,
"is my very own tree, because he's so very big, and so very, very old. Adam says he's the oldest tree in the orchard. I call him King Arthur, 'cause he is so big and strong, just like a king should be, you know, and all the other trees are his knights of the Round Table."
But Bellew was not looking at King Arthur just then. His eyes were turned to where one came towards them through the green, one surely as tall and gracious, as proud and beautiful as Enid or Guinevere, or any of those lovely ladies, for all her simple gown of blue, and the sunbonnet that shaded the beauty of her face. Yes, as he gazed, Bellew was sure and certain that she who, all unconscious of their presence, came slowly towards them with the red glow of the sunset about her, was handsomer, lovelier, statelier, and altogether more desirable than all the beautiful ladies of King Arthur's court, or any other court soever. But now Small Porges, finding him so silent, and seeing where he looked, must needs behold her too, and gave a sudden glad cry, and ran out from behind the great bulk of King Arthur, and she, hearing his voice, turned and ran to greet him, and sank upon her knees before him, and clasped him against her heart, and rejoiced, and wept, and scolded him all in a breath. Wherefore Bellew, unobserved, as yet in King Arthur's shadow, watching the proud head with its wayward curls, for the sunbonnet had been tossed back upon her shoulders, watching the quick, passionate caress of those slender, brown hands, and listening to the thrilling tenderness of that low, soft voice, felt, all at once, strangely lonely, and friendless, and out of place, very rough and awkward, and very much aware of his dusty person. Felt indeed as any other ordinary human might, who had tumbled unexpectedly into Arcadia. Therefore, he turned, thinking to steal quietly away.
"You see, Auntie, I went out to try and find a fortune for you,"
Small Porges was explaining.
"and I looked and looked, but I didn't find a bit."
"My dear, dear, brave Georgy," said Anthea, and would have kissed him again, but he put her off.
"Wait a minute, please, Auntie,"
he said excitedly.
"'cause I did find something. Just as I was growing very tired and disappointed, I found Uncle Porges, under a hedge, you know."
"Uncle Porges?" said Anthea, starting.
"Oh, well, that must be the man Mr. Cassilis mentioned. So I brought him with me,"
pursued Small Porges,
"and there he is."
And he pointed triumphantly towards King Arthur. Glancing thither, Anthea beheld a tall, dusty figure moving off among the trees.
"Oh, wait, please,"
she called, rising to her feet, and, with Small Porges's hand in hers, approached Bellew, who had stopped with his dusty back to them.
I want to thank you for taking care of my nephew. If you will come up to the house, cook shall give you a good meal, and if you are in need of work,
Her voice faltered uncertainly, and she stopped. "Thank you," said Bellew, turning and lifting his hat.
"Oh, I beg your pardon,"
said Anthea. Now, as their eyes met, it seemed to Bellew as though he had lived all his life in expectation of this moment, and he knew that all his life he should never forget this moment. But now, even while he looked at her, he saw her cheeks flush painfully, and her dark eyes grow troubled.
"I beg your pardon," said she again. I thought Mr. Cassilis gave me to understand that you were—"
"A very dusty, hungry-looking fellow, perhaps," smiled Bellew, "and he was quite right, you know. The dust you can see for yourself, but the hunger you must take my word for. As for the work, I assure you exercises precisely what I am looking for." "But," said Anthea, and stopped, and tapped the grass nervously with her foot, and twisted one of her bonnet strings, and, meeting Bellew's steady gaze, flushed again.
"But you are—" "My Uncle Porges," her nephew chimed in, "and I brought him home with me 'cause he's going to help me find a fortune, and he hasn't got any place to go to, 'cause his home's far, far beyond the bounding billow. So, you will let him stay, won't you, Auntie Anthea?"
"Why, Georgy," she began, but seeing her distressed look, Bellew came to her rescue. "Oh, pray do, Miss Anthea," said he in his quiet, easy manner. "My name is Bellew," he went on to explain. "I am an American, without family or friends, here, there, or anywhere, and with nothing in the world to do but follow the path of the winds. Indeed, I am rather a solitary fellow, at least, I was, until I met my nephew Porges here. Since then, I've been wondering if there would be, room for such as I at Dapplemere."
"Oh, well, there would be plenty of room,"
said Anthea, hesitating, and wrinkling her white brow, for a lodger was something entirely new in her experience. "As to my character," pursued Bellew, "though something of a vagabond, I am not a rogue. At least, I hope not, and I could pay, £4 or £5 a week."
"Oh!"
exclaimed Anthea with a little gasp. "If that would be sufficient."
"It is a great deal too much,"
said Anthea, who would have scarcely dared to ask 3. "Pardon me, but I think not," said Bellew, shaking his head. "You see, I am, rather extravagant in my eating. Eggs, you know, lots of them, and ham, and beef, and, A duck quacked loudly from the vicinity of a neighboring pond. Certainly an occasional duck. Indeed, 5 pounds a week would scarcely—
3 would be ample,
said Anthea with a little nod of finality. Very well, said Bellew. We'll make it 4 and have done with it. Anthea Devine, being absolute mistress of Dapplemere, was in the habit of exerting her authority, and having her own way in most things. Therefore she glanced up, in some surprise at this tall, dusty, rather lazy-looking personage, and she noticed, even as had Small Porges, that he was indeed very big and wide. She noticed also that, despite the easy courtesy of his manner, and the quizzical light of his grey eyes, his chin was very square, and that, despite his gentle voice, he had the air of one who meant exactly what he said. Nevertheless, she was much inclined to take issue with him upon the matter, plainly observing which, Bellew smiled and shook his head. "Pray be reasonable," he said in his gentle voice. "If you send me away to some horrible inn or other, it will cost me, being an American, more than that every week, in tips and things, so let's shake hands on it, and call it settled," and he held out his hand to her. 4 pounds a week! It would be a veritable godsend just at present, while she was so hard put to make both ends meet. 4 pounds a week! So Anthea stood, lost in frowning thought, until meeting his frank smile, she laughed. You are dreadfully persistent," she said, and I know it is too much, but we'll try to make you as comfortable as we can," and she laid her hand in his. And thus it was that George Bellew came to Dapplemere in the glory of the afterglow of an August afternoon, breathing the magic air of Arcadia, which is, and always has been, of that rare quality warranted to go to the head, sooner or later. And thus it was that Small Porges, with his bundle on his shoulder, viewed this tall, dusty uncle with the eye of possession, which is ofttimes an eye of rapture. And Anthea? She was busy calculating to a scrupulous nicety the very vexed question as to exactly how far 4 pounds per week might be made to go to the best possible advantage of all concerned. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 6 of the sad condition of the haunting spectre of the Might Have Been. Dapplemere Farmhouse, or the Manor, as it was still called by many, had been built when Henry VIII was king, as the carved inscription above the door testified. The house of Dapplemere was a place of many gables, and latticed windows, and with tall, slender chimneys shaped and wrought into things of beauty and delight. It possessed a great old hall. There were spacious chambers, and broad stairways. There were panelled corridors, sudden flights of steps that led up or down again for no apparent reason. There were broad and generous hearths, and deep window seats, and everywhere, within and without, there lurked an indefinable old-world charm that was the heritage of years. Storms had buffeted, and tempests had beaten upon it, but all in vain, for, save that the bricks glowed a deeper red where they peeped out beneath the clinging ivy, the old house stood as it had upon that far day when it was fashioned, in the year of our Lord 1524. In England many such homes are yet to be found, monuments of the bad old times, memorials of the dark ages, when lath and stucco existed not, and the jerry-builder had no being. But where among them all might be found such another parlour as this at Dapplemere, with its low raftered ceiling, its great carved mantel, its panelled walls whence old portraits looked down at one like dream faces, from dim and nebulous backgrounds, and where might be found two such bright-eyed, rosy-cheeked, quick-footed, deft-handed Phyllises as the 2 buxom maids who flitted here and there, obedient to their mistress's word or gesture. And lastly, where in all this wide world could there ever be found just such another hostess as Miss Anthea herself? Something of all this was in Bellew's mind as he sat with Small Porges beside him, watching Miss Anthea dispense tea, brewed as it should be, in an earthen teapot. "Milk and sugar, Mr. Bellew?" "Thank you."
This is blackberry, and this is raspberry and red currant, but the blackberry jam's the best, Uncle Porges."
"Thank you, nephew."
"Now aren't you awful glad I found you, under that hedge, Uncle Porges?"
"Nephew, I am." "Nephew?" repeated Anthea, glancing at him with raised brows. "Oh yes," nodded Bellew. "We adopted each other, at about 4 o'clock this afternoon."
"Under a hedge, you know,"
added Small Porges. "Wasn't it a very sudden and altogether unheard of proceeding?" Anthea inquired. "Well, it might have been if it hadn't happened anywhere but in Arcadia."
"What do you mean by Arcadia, Uncle Porges?"
"A place I've been looking for, nearly all my life, nephew. I'll trouble you for the blackberry jam, my Porges."
"Yes, try the blackberry. Aunt Priscilla made it her very own self."
"You know, it's perfectly ridiculous," said Anthea, frowning and laughing both at the same time. "What is, Miss Anthea?"
"Why, that you should be sitting here calling Georgy your nephew, and that I should be pouring out tea for you, quite as a matter of course."
"It seems to me the most delightfully natural thing in the world," said Bellew in his slow, grave manner.
"But I've only known you half an hour."
"Oh, but then friendships ripen quickly, in Arcadia. I wonder what Aunt Priscilla will have to say about it." "Aunt Priscilla?"
"She is our housekeeper, the dearest, busiest, gentlest little housekeeper in all the world, but with very sharp eyes, Mr. Bellew. She will either like you very much, or not at all. There are no half measures about Aunt Priscilla."
"Now I wonder which it will be,"
said Bellew, helping himself to more jam.
"Oh, she'll like you, of course," nodded Small Porges. "I know she'll like you, 'cause you're so different to Mr. Cassilis. He's got black hair and a mustache, you know, and your hair's gold like mine, and your mustache isn't there, is it? And I know she doesn't like Mr. Cassilis, and I don't either, 'cause she will be back tomorrow,"
said Anthea, silencing Small Porges with a gentle touch of her hand. "And we shall be glad, shan't we, Georgy? The house is not the same place without her. You see, I am off in the fields all day as a rule. A farm, even such a small one as Dapplemere, is a great responsibility, and takes up all one's time, if it is to be made to pay."
"And sometimes it doesn't pay at all, you know," added Small Porges, "and then Auntie Anthea worries, and I worry too. Farming isn't what it was in Adam's young days, so that's why I must find a fortune, early tomorrow morning, you know, so my auntie won't have to worry any more."
Now when he had got thus far, Anthea leaned over and, taking him by surprise, kissed Small Porges suddenly. "It was very good and brave of you, dear," said she in her soft, thrilling voice, "to go out all alone into this big world to try and find a fortune for me." And here she would have kissed him again, but that he reminded her that they were not alone.
"But, Georgy, dear, fortunes are very hard to find, especially round Dapplemere, I'm afraid," said she with a rueful little laugh. "Yes, that's why I was going to Africa, you know."
"Africa," she repeated, "Africa."
"Oh yes," nodded Bellew. "When I met him he was on his way there to bring back gold for you, in a sack. Only Uncle Porges said it was a goodish way off, you know, so I decided to stay and find the fortune nearer home."
And thus they talked unaffectedly together until, tea being over, Anthea volunteered to show Bellew over her small domain, and they went out, all three, into an evening that breathed of roses and honeysuckle. And as they went, slow-footed through the deepening twilight, Small Porges directed Bellew's attention to certain nooks and corners that might be well calculated to conceal the fortune they were to find, while Anthea pointed out to him the beauties of shady wood, of rolling meadow, and winding stream. But there were other beauties that neither of them thought to call to his attention, but which Bellew noted with observing eyes none the less. Such, for instance, as the way Anthea had of drooping her shadowy lashes at sudden and unexpected moments, the wistful droop of her warm, red lips, and the sweet, round column of her throat. These, and much beside, Bellew noticed for himself as they walked on together through this midsummer evening. And so, betimes, Bellew got him to bed, and though the hour was ridiculously early, yet he fell into a profound slumber, and dreamed of nothing at all. But, far away upon the road, forgotten, and out of mind, with futile writhing and grimaces, the haunting shadow of the might have been gibbered in the shadows. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 7, which concerns itself, among other matters, with the old Adam. Bellew awakened early next morning, which was an unusual thing for Bellew to do under ordinary circumstances, since he was one who held with that poet who has written, somewhere or other, something to the following effect: God bless the man who first discovered sleep, but damn the man with curses loud and deep, who first invented early rising. Nevertheless, Bellew, as has been said, awoke early next morning, to find the sun pouring in at his window, and making a glory all about him. But it was not this that had aroused him, he thought as he lay blinking drowsily, nor the blackbird piping so wonderfully in the apple tree outside, a very inquisitive apple tree that had writhed and contorted itself most unnaturally in its efforts to peep in at the window. Therefore Bellew fell to wondering, sleepily enough, what it could have been. Presently it came again, the sound, a very peculiar sound, the like of which Bellew had never heard before, which, as he listened, gradually evolved itself into a kind of monotonous chant, intoned by a voice deep and harsh, yet withal not unmusical. Now the words of the chant were these: When I am dead, diddle diddle, as well may hap, bury me deep, diddle diddle, under the tap. Under the tap, diddle diddle, I'll tell you why, that I may drink, diddle diddle, when I am dry. Hereupon Bellew rose, and, crossing to the open casement, leaned out into the golden freshness of the morning. Looking about, he presently espied the singer, one who carried 2 pails suspended from a yoke upon his shoulders, a very square man, that is to say, square of shoulder, square of head, and square of jaw, being, in fact, none other than the waggoner with whom he had fought and ridden on the previous afternoon. Seeing which, Bellew hailed him in cheery greeting. The man glanced up, and, breaking off his song in the middle of a note, stood gazing at Bellew, open-mouthed. "What? Be that you, sir?" he inquired, at last, and then, "Lord, and what be you a-doing up there?" "Why, sleeping, of course," answered Bellew. "What? Again?" exclaimed the waggoner with a grin. "You do be forever a-sleepin', I do believe." "Not when you're anywhere about," laughed Bellew. "Was it me as woke ye, then?" "Your singing did." "My singing? Lord love ye, and well it might. My singing would wake the dead. Leastways, so Prudence says, and she's generally right. Leastways, if she ain't, she's an uncommon good cook, and that goes a long way wi' most of us. But I don't sing very often unless I be alone, or easy in my mind and 'appy-hearted, which I ain't." "No?" inquired Bellew. "Not by no manner o' means I ain't. Contrariwise, my 'eart be sore and full o' gloom, which ain't to be wondered at, nohow." "And yet you were singing." "Ay, for sure I were singing. But then who could help singing on such a morning as this be, and wi' the blackbird a-piping away in the tree here? Oh, I were singing, I don't go for to deny it, but it's sore-'earted I be, and filled with gloom, sir, notwithstanding." "You mean," said Bellew, becoming suddenly thoughtful, "that you are haunted by the carking spectre of the, might have been?"
"Lord bless you, no, sir. This ain't no spectre, nor yet no skellington. which, arter all, is only old bones and such. No, this ain't nothing of that sort, and no more it ain't a thing I can stand 'ere a-magging about with a long day's work before me, axing your pardon, sir."
Saying which, the waggoner nodded suddenly, and strode off with his pails clanking cheerily. Very soon Bellew was shaved, and dressed, and going downstairs, he let himself out into the early sunshine, and strolled away towards the farmyard, where cocks crew, cows lowed, ducks quacked, turkeys and geese gobbled and hissed, and where the waggoner moved to and fro among them all, like a presiding genius. "I think," said Bellew as he came up, "I think you must be the Adam I have heard of."
"That be my name, sir."
"Then, Adam, fill your pipe," and Bellew extended his pouch, whereupon Adam thanked him, and, fishing a small, short, black clay from his pocket, proceeded to fill and light it.
"Yes, sir,"
he nodded, inhaling the tobacco with much apparent enjoyment.
"Adam, I were baptized some 30-odd years ago, but I generally calls myself Old Adam."
"But you're not old, Adam."
"Why, it ain't on account of my age, you see, sir. It be all because of the old Adam as is inside of me. Lord love ya, I am naturally that full of the old Adam as never was, and he's always up and taken of me at the shortest notice. Only t'other day he up and took me because of Job Jagway. He works for Squire Cassilis, you'll understand, sir, because Job Jagway says as our wheat, meaning Miss Anthea's wheat, you'll understand, sir, was mouldy. Well, the old Adam up and took me to that extent, sir, that they had to carry Job Jagway home afterwards, which is all on account of the old Adam. Me being the mildest chap you ever see, naturally. Mild? Ah, sucking doves wouldn't be nothing to me for mildness."
"And what did the Squire have to say about your spoiling his man?"
"Wrote to Miss Anthea, of course, sir. He's always writing to Miss Anthea about something or other. Says as how he was minded to lock me up for assault and battery, but out of respect for her would let me off with a warning."
"Miss Anthea was worried, I suppose?"
"Worried, sir? Oh, Adam," says she, "oh, Adam, haven't I got enough to bear, but you must make it harder for me?" And I see the tears in her eyes while she said it. Me make it harder for her? Just as if I wouldn't make things lighter for her if I could, which I can't. Just as if, to help Miss Anthea, I wouldn't let 'em take me and, well, never mind what. Only I would."
"Yes, I'm sure you would," nodded Bellew. "And is the Squire over here at Dapplemere very often, Adam?"
"Why, not so much lately, sir. Last time were yesterday, just before Master Georgie come home. I were at work here in the yard, and Squire comes riding up to me, smiling quite friendly like, which were pretty good of him, considering as Job Jagway ain't back to work yet. 'Oh, Adam,' says he, 'so you're 'aving a sale here at Dapplemere, are you?' Meaning, sir, a sale of some bits and sticks of furniture as Miss Anthea's forced to part with to meet some bill or other. 'Summat o' that, sir,' says I, making as light of it as I could. 'Why then, Adam,' says he, 'if Job Jagway should happen to come over to buy a few of the things, no more fighting,' says he. And so he nods, and smiles, and off he rides. And, sir, as I watched him go, the old Adam riz up at me to that extent as it's a mercy I didn't have no pitchfork handy."
Bellew, sitting on the shaft of a cart with his back against a rick, listened to this narration with an air of dreamy abstraction. But Adam's quick eyes noticed that despite the unruffled serenity of his brow, his chin seemed rather more prominent than usual. "So that was why you were feeling gloomy, was it, Adam?"
"Ah, and enough to make any man feel gloomy, I should think. Miss Anthea's brave enough, but I reckon 'twill come nigh breaking her heart to see the old stuff sold, the furniture and that, so she's going to drive over to Cranbrook to be out of the way while it's a-doing."
"And when does the sale take place?"
"The Saturday arter next, sir, as ever was," Adam answered, "but, hush, mum's the word, sir."
He broke off, and winking violently with a sideways motion of the head, he took up his pitchfork. Wherefore, glancing round, Bellew saw Anthea coming towards them, fresh and sweet as the morning. Her hands were full of flowers, and she carried her sunbonnet upon her arm. Here and there a rebellious curl had escaped from its fastenings as though desirous, and very naturally, of kissing the soft oval of her cheek. or the white curve of her neck. And among them, Bellew noticed one in particular, a roguish curl that glowed in the sun with coppery light, and peeped at him wantingly above her ear. "Good morning," said he, rising, and to all appearance addressing the curl in question. "You are early abroad this morning." "Early, Mr. Bellew? I've been up hours. I'm generally out at 4 o'clock on market days. We work hard and long at Dapplemere," she answered, giving him her hand with her grave, sweet smile. "Aye, for sure," nodded Adam, "but farming ain't what it was in my young days." "But I think we shall do well with the hops, Adam." "Hops, Miss Anthea? Lord love you, there ain't no hops nowhere so good as our'n be." "We ought to be ready for picking soon. Do you think 60 people will be enough?" "Ah, there'll be more'n enough, Miss Anthea." "And, Adam, the 5-acre field should be mowed today." "I'll set the men at it right after breakfast. I'll have it done, trust me, Miss Anthea." "I do, Adam, you know that." And with a smiling nod she turned away. Now, as Bellew walked on beside her, he felt a strange constraint upon him such as he had never experienced towards any woman before, and the which he was at great pains with himself to account for. Indeed, so rapt was he, that he started suddenly to find that she was asking him a question. "Do you like Dapplemere, Mr. Bellew?" "Like it?" he repeated. "Like it? Yes, indeed." "I'm so glad," she answered, her eyes glowing with pleasure. "It was a much larger property once. Look," and she pointed away across cornfields and rolling meadow to the distant woods. "In my grandfather's time it was all his, as far as you can see and farther, but it has dwindled since then, and today my Dapplemere is very small indeed." "You must be very fond of such a beautiful place." "Oh, I love it!" she cried passionately. "If ever I had to give it up, I think I should die." She stopped suddenly, and as though somewhat abashed by this sudden outburst, adding in a lighter tone, "If I seem rather tragic, it's because this is the only home I have ever known." "Well," said Bellew, appearing rather more dreamy than usual just then, "I have journeyed here and there in this world of ours. I have wandered up and down, and to and fro in it, like a certain celebrated personage who shall be nameless. Yet I never saw or dreamed of any such place as this Dapplemere of yours. It is like Arcadia itself, only I am out of place. I seem, somehow, to be too commonplace, and altogether matter-of-fact." "I'm sure I'm matter-of-fact enough," she said with her low, sweet laugh that Bellew thought was all too rare. "You?" said he, and shook his head. "Well?" she inquired, glancing at him through her wind-tossed curls. "You are like some fair and stately lady out of the old romances," he said gravely. "In a print gown and with a sunbonnet." "Even so," he nodded. Here, for no apparent reason, happening to meet his glance, the colour deepened in her cheek, and she was silent. Wherefore, Bellew went on, in his slow, placid tones. "You, surely, are the princess ruling this fair land of Arcadia, and I am the stranger within your gates. It behooves you, therefore, to be merciful to this stranger, if only for the sake of, our mutual nephew." Whatever Anthea might have said in answer was cut short by Small Porges himself, who came galloping towards them with the sun bright in his curls. "Oh, Uncle Porges!" he panted as he came up. I was afraid you'd gone away and left me. I've been hunting and hunting for you ever since I got up." "No, I haven't gone away yet, my Porges, you see." "And you won't go, ever or ever, will you?" "That," said Bellew, taking the small hand in his, "that is a question that we had better leave to the future, nephew." "But why?" "Well, you see, it doesn't rest with me, altogether, my Porges." "Then who—" he was beginning, but Anthea's soft voice interrupted him. "Georgy, dear, didn't Prudence send you to tell us that breakfast was ready?" "Oh, yes, I was forgetting. Awful silly of me, wasn't it? But you are going to stay?
Oh, a long, long time, aren't you, Uncle Porges?
I certainly hope so, answered Bellew. Now, as he spoke, his eyes, by the merest chance in the world, of course, happened to meet Anthea's, whereupon she turned and slipped on her sunbonnet, which was very natural, for the sun was growing hot already.
I'm awful glad, sighed Small Porges, and Auntie's glad too, aren't you, Auntie?
Why, of course, from the depths of the sunbonnet.
'Cause now, you see, there'll be two of us to take care of you. Uncle Porges is so nice and big and wide, isn't he, Auntie?
Yes.
Oh, Georgie, what are you talking about? Why, I mean, I'm rather small to take care of you all by myself alone, Auntie, though I do my best, of course. But now that I found myself a big, tall Uncle Porges, under the hedge, you know, we can take care of you together, can't we, Auntie Anthea?
But Anthea only hurried on without speaking, whereupon Small Porges continued all unheeding.
You remember the other night, Auntie, when you were crying and you said you wished you had someone very big and strong to take care of you?
Oh, George! Bellew heartily wished that sunbonnets had never been thought of.
But you did, you know, Auntie, and so that was why I went on and found my Uncle Porges for you, so that he...
But here, Mistress Anthea, for all her pride and stateliness, catching her gown about her, fairly ran on down the path, and never paused until she had reached the cool, dim parlour. Being there, she tossed aside her sunbonnet, and looked at herself in the long, old mirror, and, though surely no mirror made by man ever reflected a fairer vision of dark-eyed witchery and loveliness, nevertheless, Anthea stamped her foot and frowned at it.
"Oh!" she exclaimed, and then again, "Oh, George!"
and covered her burning cheeks. Meanwhile, Big Porges and Small Porges, walking along hand in hand, shook their heads solemnly, wondering much upon the capriciousness of aunts, and the waywardness thereof.
"I wonder why she runned away, Uncle Porges."
Ah, I wonder.
"I 'spect she's a bit angry with me, you know, 'cause I told you she was crying."
Said Bellew.
"And Auntie takes an awful lot of looking after,"
sighed Small Porges. Yes, nodded Bellew, I suppose so. Especially if she happens to be young and,
"And what, Uncle Porges?"
beautiful, nephew.
"Oh, do you think she's really beautiful?" demanded Small Porges.
I'm afraid I do, Bellew confessed.
"So does Mr. Cassilis. I heard him tell her so once, in the orchard."
Said Bellew.
"Ah, but you ought to see her when she comes to tuck me up at night, with her hair all down and hanging all about her, like a shiny cloak, you know."
Said Bellew.
"Please, Uncle Porges," said Georgie, turning to look up at him, "what makes you hum so much this morning?"
I was thinking, my Porges.
"About my Auntie Anthea?"
I do admit the soft impeachment, sir.
"Well, I'm thinking too.
What is it, old chap?"
"I'm thinking we ought to begin to find that fortune for her after breakfast."
"Why, it isn't quite the right season for fortune hunting yet, at least, not in Arcadia," answered Bellew, shaking his head.
"Oh, but why not?"
"Well, the moon isn't right for one thing."
"The moon?"
echoed Small Porges. "Oh, yes, we must wait for a money moon, you know. Surely you've heard of a money moon?"
"Afraid not," sighed Small Porges regretfully. "But I've heard of a honeymoon."
"Oh, they're often much the same," nodded Bellew.
"But then when will the money moon come, and how?"
"I can't exactly say, my Porges, but come it will one of these fine nights, and when it does, we shall know that the fortune is close by, and waiting to be found. So don't worry your small head about it, just keep your eye on your uncle." Betimes they came in to breakfast, where Anthea awaited them at the head of the table. Then, who so demure, so gracious, and self-possessed, so sweetly sedate as she? But the cavalier in the picture above the carved mantel, versed in the ways of the world, and the pretty tricks and wiles of the beau sex feminine, smiled down at Bellew with an expression of such roguish waggery as said, plain as words, "We know."
and Bellew, remembering a certain pair of slender ankles that had revealed themselves in their hurried flight, smiled back at the Cavalier, and it was all he could do to refrain from winking outright. End of chapter 7.
Chapter 8 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 8, which tells of Miss Priscilla, of Peaches, and of Sergeant Appleby, late of the 19th Hussars. Small Porges was at his lessons. He was perched at the great oak table beside the window, pen in hand, and within easy reach of Anthea, who sat busied with her daily letters and accounts. Small Porges was laboriously inscribing in a somewhat splashed and besmeared copybook the rather surprising facts that a stitch in time saves 9, that the Tagus, a river in Spain, R, and that Artaxerxes was a king of the Persians, A, and the like surprising, curious, and interesting items of news, his pen making not half so many curls and twists as did his small red tongue. As he wrote, he frowned terrifically, and sighed oft betwixt whiles, and Bellew, watching, where he stood outside the window, noticed that Anthea frowned also, as she bent over her accounts, and sighed wearily more than once. It was after a sigh rather more hopeless than usual that, chancing to raise her eyes, they encountered those of the watcher outside, who, seeing himself discovered, smiled, and came to lean in at the open window. "Won't they balance?" he inquired, with a nod toward the heap of bills and papers before her. "Oh yes," she answered with a rueful little smile, "but on the wrong side, if you know what I mean." "I know," he nodded, watching how her lashes curled against her cheek. "If only we had done better with our first crop of wheat," she sighed. "Job Jogway said it was mouldy, you know. That's why Adam punched him in the—" "Georgie, go on with your work, sir." "Yes, Auntie." And immediately Small Porges's pen began to scratch, and his tongue to writhe and twist as before. "I'm building all my hopes, this year, on the hops," said Anthea, sinking her head upon her hand. "If they should fail—" "Well?" inquired Bellew, with his gaze upon the soft curve of her throat. "I daren't think of it." "Then don't. Let us talk of something else." "Yes, of Aunt Priscilla," nodded Anthea. "She is in the garden." "And pray, who is Aunt Priscilla?" "Go and meet her." "But go and find her in the orchard," repeated Anthea. "Oh, do go, and leave us to our work." Thus it was, that turning obediently into the orchard, and looking about, Bellew presently espied a little bright-eyed old lady who sat beneath the shadow of King Arthur, with a rustic table beside her, upon which stood a basket of sewing. Now, as he went, he chanced to spy a ball of worsted, that had fallen by the way, and stooping, therefore, he picked it up, while she watched him with her quick, bright eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Bellew," she said in response to his salutation. "It was nice of you to trouble to pick up an old woman's ball of worsted." As she spoke, she rose, and dropped him a courtesy, and then, as he looked at her again, he saw that despite her words, and despite her white hair, she was much younger, and prettier than he had thought. "I am Miss Anthea's housekeeper," she went on. "I was away when you arrived, looking after one of Miss Anthea's old ladies. Pray be seated. Miss Anthea, bless her dear heart, calls me her aunt, but I'm not really, oh dear no, I'm no relation at all. But I've lived with her long enough to feel as if I was her aunt, and her uncle, and her father, and her mother, all rolled into one, though I should be rather small to be so many, shouldn't I?" And she laughed so gaily and unaffectedly that Bellew laughed too. "I tell you all this," she went on, keeping pace to her flying needle, "because I have taken a fancy to you, on the spot. I always like or dislike a person on the spot. First impressions, you know. Yes," she continued, glancing up at him sideways, "I like you just as much as I dislike Mr. Cassilis.
Hi-ho, how I do detest that man. There, now, that's off my mind." "And why?" inquired Bellew, smiling. "Dear me, Mr. Bellew, how should I know? Only I do, and what's more, he knows it too." "And how?" she inquired, changing the subject abruptly. "How is your bed? Comfortable, "Very." "You sleep well?" "Like a top." "Any complaints, so far?" "None whatever," laughed Bellew, shaking his head. "That is very well. We have never had a boarder before, and Miss Anthea, bless her dear soul, was a little nervous about it. And here's the Sergeant." "I, beg your pardon?" said Bellew. "The Sergeant!" repeated Miss Priscilla, with a prim little nod. "Sergeant Appleby, late of the 19th Hussars, a soldier every inch of him, Mr. Bellew, with one arm. Over there, by the peaches." Glancing in the direction she indicated, Bellew observed a tall figure, very straight and upright, clad in a tight-fitting blue coat, with extremely tight trousers strapped beneath the insteps, and with a hat balanced upon his close-cropped, grizzled head at a perfectly impossible angle for any save an ex-cavalryman. Now, as he stood examining a peach tree that flourished against the opposite wall, Bellew saw that his right sleeve was empty, sure enough, and was looped across his broad chest. "The very first thing he will say will be that it is a very fine day," nodded Miss Priscilla, stitching away faster than ever, "and the next that the peaches are doing remarkably well. Now mark my words, Mr. Bellew." As she spoke, the Sergeant wheeled suddenly right about face, and came striding down towards them, jingling imaginary spurs, and with his stick tucked up under his remaining arm, very much as if it had been a sabre. Being come up to them, the Sergeant raised a stiff arm as though about to salute them, military fashion, but, apparently changing his mind, took off the straw hat instead, and put it on again, more over one ear than ever. "A particular fine day, Miss Priscilla, for the time of the year," said he. "Indeed, I quite agree with you, Sergeant," returned little Miss Priscilla with a bright nod, and a sly glance at Bellew, as much to say, "I told you so." "And the peaches, ma'am," continued the Sergeant, "the peaches never looked better, ma'am." Having said which, he stood looking at nothing in particular, with his one hand resting lightly upon his hip. "Yes, to be sure, Sergeant," nodded Miss Priscilla with another sly look, "but let me introduce you to Mr. Bellew, who is staying at Dapplemere." The Sergeant stiffened, once more began a salute, changed his mind, took off his hat instead, and, after looking at it as though not quite sure what to do with it next, clapped it back upon his ear, in imminent danger of falling off, and was done with it. "Proud to know you, sir. Your servant, sir." "How do you do?" said Bellew, and held out his hand with his frank smile. The Sergeant hesitated, then put out his remaining hand. "My left, sir," said he apologetically. "Can't be helped. Left my right, out in India, a good many years ago. Good place for soldiering, India, sir. Plenty of active service. Chances of promotion, though the son bad." "Sergeant," said Miss Priscilla, without seeming to glance up from her sewing, "Sergeant, your hat!" Hereupon the Sergeant gave a sudden, sideways jerk of the head, and, in the very nick of time, saved the article in question from tumbling off, and, very dexterously, brought it to the top of his close-cropped head, whence it immediately began, slowly, and by scarcely perceptible degrees, to slide down to his ear again. "Sergeant," said Miss Priscilla again, "sit down, do." "Thank you, ma'am," said he, and proceeded to seat himself at the other end of the rustic bench, where he remained, bolt upright, and with his long legs stretched out straight before him, as is and has been the manner of cavalrymen since they first wore straps. "And now," said he, staring straight in front of him, "how might Miss Anthea be?" "Oh, very well, thank you," nodded Miss Priscilla. "Good!" exclaimed the Sergeant, with his eyes still fixed, "very good!" Here he passed his hand 2 or 3 times across his shaven chin, regarding an apple tree near by, with an expression of the most profound interest. "And how," said he again, "how might Master Georgy be?" "Master Georgy is as well as ever," answered Miss Priscilla,
stitching away faster than before, and Bellew thought she kept her rosy cheeks stooped a little lower over her work. Meanwhile, the Sergeant continued to regard the tree with the same degree of lively interest, and to rasp his fingers to and fro across his chin. Suddenly, he coughed behind his hand, whereupon Miss Priscilla raised her head, and looked at him. "Well?" she inquired, very softly. "And pray, ma'am," said the Sergeant, removing his gaze from the tree with a jerk, "how might you be feeling, ma'am?" "Much the same as usual, thank you," she answered, smiling like a girl for all her white hair, as the Sergeant's eyes met hers. "You look," said he, pausing to cough behind his hand again, "you look blooming, ma'am, if you'll allow the expression, blooming, as you ever do, ma'am." "I'm an old woman, Sergeant, as well you know," sighed Miss Priscilla, shaking her head. "Old, ma'am?" repeated the Sergeant. "Old, ma'am? Nothing of the sort, ma'am. Age has nothing to do with it. 'Tisn't the years as count. We aren't any older than we feel, eh, sir?" "Of course not," answered Bellew. "Nor than we look, eh, sir?" "Certainly not, Sergeant," answered Bellew. "And she, sir, she don't look a day older than 35, said Bellew. "Exactly, sir, very true, my own opinion, 35 exactly, sir." "Sergeant," said Miss Priscilla, bending over her work again, "Sergeant, your hat!" The Sergeant, hereupon, removed the distracting headgear altogether, and sat with it upon his knee, staring hard at the tree again. Then, all at once, with a sudden gesture, he drew a large, silver watch from his pocket, rather as if it were some weapon of offence, looked at it, listened to it, and then, nodding his head, rose to his feet. "Must be going," he said, standing very straight, and looking down at little Miss Priscilla. "Though sorry as ever, must be going, ma'am. Miss Priscilla, ma'am, good day to you." And he stretched out his hand to her with a sudden, jerky movement. Miss Priscilla paused in her sewing, and looked up at him with her youthful smile. "Must you go so soon, Sergeant? Then good-bye, until tomorrow." And she laid her very small hand in his big palm. The Sergeant stared down at it as though he were greatly minded to raise it to his lips, instead of doing which, he dropped it, suddenly, and turned to Bellew. "Sir, I am proud to have met you. Sir, there is a poor crippled soldier as I know. His cottage is very small and humble, sir, but if you ever feel like dropping in on him, sir, by day or night, he will be honoured, sir, honoured. And that's me, Sergeant Richard Appleby, late of the 19th Hussars, at your service, sir." Saying which, he put on his hat, stiff-armed, wheeled, and strode away through the orchard, jingling his imaginary spurs louder than ever. "Well?" inquired Miss Priscilla in her quick, bright way. "Well, Mr. Bellew, what do you think of him? First impressions are always best. At least I think so. What do you think of Sergeant Appleby?" "I think he's a splendid fellow," said Bellew, looking after the Sergeant's upright figure. "A very foolish old fellow, I think, and as stiff as one of the ramrods of one of his own guns," said Miss Priscilla, but her clear blue eyes were very soft and tender as she spoke. "And as fine a soldier as a man, I'm sure," said Bellew. "Why, yes, he was a good soldier, once upon a time, I believe. He won the Victoria Cross for doing something or other that was very brave, and he wears it with all his other medals, pinned on the inside of his coat. Oh yes, he was a fine soldier once, but he's a very foolish old soldier now, I think, and as stiff as a ramrod of one of his own guns. But I'm glad you like him, Mr. Bellew, and he will be proud and happy for you to call and see him at his cottage. And now, I suppose, it is 11:30, isn't it?" "Yes, just 12:30, nodded Bellew, glancing at his watch. "Exact to time as usual," said Miss Priscilla. "I don't think the Sergeant has missed a minute, or varied a minute in the last 5 years. You see, he is such a very methodical man, Mr. Bellew." "Why then, does he come every day at the same hour?" "Every day," nodded Miss Priscilla. "It has become a matter of habit with him." "Ah?" said Bellew, smiling. "If you were to ask me why he comes, I should answer that I fancy it is to
Look at the peaches. Dear me, Mr. Bellew, what a very foolish old soldier he is, to be sure." Saying which, pretty, bright-eyed Miss Priscilla laughed again, folded up her work, settled it in the basket with a deft little pat, and, rising, took a small crutch stick from where it had lain concealed, and then Bellew saw that she was lame. "Oh yes, I'm a cripple, you see," she nodded. "Oh, very, very lame. My ankle, you know. That is why I came here. The big world didn't want a poor lame old woman. That is why Miss Anthea made me her aunt, God bless her. No, thank you, I can carry my basket. So you see, he has lost an arm, his right one, and I am lame in my foot. Perhaps that is why. Hi-ho, how beautifully the blackbirds are singing this morning, to be sure." End of chapter 8.
Chapter 9 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 9, in which may be found some description of Arcadia and gooseberries. Anthea, leaning on her rake in a shady corner of the 5-acre field, turned to watch Bellew, who, stripped to his shirt-sleeves, bare of neck and arm, and pitchfork in hand, was busy tossing up great mounds of sweet-smelling hay to Adam, who stood upon a wagon to receive it, with Small Porges perched up beside him. A week had elapsed since Bellew had found his way to Dapplemere, a week which had only served to strengthen the bonds of affection between him and his nephew, and to win over sharp-eyed, shrewd little Miss Priscilla to the extent of declaring him to be, "First, a gentleman, Anthea, my dear, and secondly, what is much rarer nowadays, a true man." A week, and already he was hail fellow well met with everyone about the place, for who was proof against his unaffected gaiety, his simple, easy, good fellowship? So he laughed, and joked as he swung his pitchfork, awkwardly enough to be sure, and received all hints and directions as to its use, in the kindly spirit they were tendered. And Anthea, watching him from her shady corner, sighed once or twice, and catching herself so doing, stamped her foot at herself, and pulled her sunbonnet closer about her face. "No, Adam," he was saying, "depend upon it, there is nothing like exercise, and of all exercise, give me a pitchfork." "Why, as to that, Mr. Bellew, sir," Adam retorted, "I say, so be it, so long as I ain't near the wrong end of it, for the way you do 'ave a flourishin' and a whirlin' that theer fork is fair astonishin', I do declare it be." "Why, you see, Adam, there are some born with a leaning towards pitchforks, as there are others born to the pen, and the palette and things. But for me, Adam, the pitchfork every time," said Bellew, mopping his brow. "If you was to try and 'andle it more as if it was a pitchfork now, Mr. Bellew, sir," suggested Adam, and, not waiting for Bellew's laughing rejoinder, he chirruped to the horses, and the great wagon creaked away with its mountainous load, surmounted by Adam's grinning visage, and Small Porges's golden curls, and followed by the rest of the merry-voiced haymakers. Now it was that, turning his head, Bellew espied Anthea watching him, whereupon he shouldered his fork, and, coming to where she sat upon a throne of hay, he sank down at her feet with a luxurious sigh. She had never seen him without a collar before, and now she could not but notice how round, and white, and powerful his neck was, and how the muscles bulged upon arm and shoulder, and how his hair curled in small damp rings upon his brow. "It is good," said he, looking up into the witching face above him. "Yes, it is very good to see you idle, just for once." "And I was thinking it was good to see you work, just for once." "Work!" he exclaimed. "My dear Miss Anthea, I assure you I have become a positive glutton for work.
It has become my earnest desire to plant things, and grow things, and chop things with axes, to mow things with scythes. I dream of pastures and plows, of pails and pitchforks by night, and by day reaping hooks, hoes, and rakes are in my thoughts continually, which all goes to show the effect of this wonderful air of Arcadia. Indeed, I am as full of suppressed energy these days as Adam is of the old Adam. And, talking of Adam, reminds me that he has solemnly pledged himself to initiate me into the mysteries of swinging a scythe tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. Yes, indeed, my heart bounds responsive to the swish of a scythe in thick grass, and my soul sits enraptured upon a pitchfork. How ridiculous you are, she laughed. And how perfectly content, he added. Is anyone ever quite content? She sighed, glancing down at him wistful-eyed. Not unless they have found Arcadia, he answered. Have you, then? Yes. He nodded complacently. Oh, yes, I've found it. Are you sure? Oh, quite sure. Arcadia, she repeated, wrinkling her brows. What is Arcadia, and where? Arcadia, answered Bellew, watching the smoke rise up from his pipe with a dreamy eye. Arcadia is the promised land, the land that everyone tries to find sometime or other, and maybe anywhere. And how came you to find it? By the most fortunate chance in the world. Tell me, said Anthea, taking a wisp of hay, and beginning to plait it in dexterous brown fingers. Tell me how you found it. Why, then, you must know, in the first place, he began in his slow, even voice, that it is a place I have sought for in all my wanderings, and I have been pretty far afield. But I sought it so long and so vainly that I began to think it was like the El Dorado of the old adventurers, and it never existed at all. Yes, said Anthea, busy with her plaiting. But one day, fate, or chance, or destiny, or their benevolent spirit, sent a certain square-shouldered wagoner to show me the way, and, after him, a very small Porges, bless him, to lead me into this wonderful Arcadia. Oh, I see, nodded Anthea, very intent upon her plaiting. But there is something more, said Bellew. Oh, said Anthea. Shall I tell you? If it is very interesting. Well then, in this delightful land, there is a castle, grim, embattled, and very strong. A castle? Said Anthea, glancing up suddenly. The castle of Heart's Desire. Oh, said she, and gave all her attention to her plaiting again. And so, continued Bellew, I am waiting, very patiently, until, in her own good time, she who rules within shall open the gate to me, or bid me go away. Into Bellew's voice had crept a thrill no one had ever heard before. He leaned nearer to her, and his dreamy eyes were keen now and eager. And she, though she saw nothing of all this, yet, being a woman, knew it was there, of course, and, for that very reason, looked resolutely away. Wherefore, once again, Bellew heartily wished that sunbonnets had never been invented. So there was silence, while Anthea stared away across the golden cornfields, yet saw nothing of them, and Bellew looked upon those slender, capable fingers that had faltered in their plaiting and stopped. And thus, upon the silence, there broke a sudden voice shrill with interest. "Go on, Uncle Porges! What about the dragons? Oh, please go on. There's always dragons in enchanted castles, you know, to guard the lovely princess. Aren't you going to have any dragons that hiss, you know, and spit out smoke and flames? Oh, do please have a dragon." And small Porges appeared from the other side of the haymow, flushed and eager. "Certainly, my Porges," nodded Bellew. drawing the small figure down beside him. "I was forgetting the dragons, but there they are, with scaly backs and iron claws, spitting out sparks and flames, just as self-respecting dragons should, and roaring away like thunder." "Ah!" exclaimed Small Porges, nestling closer to Bellew, and reaching out a hand to Auntie Anthea. "That's fine! Let's have plenty of dragons." "Do you think dozen would be enough, my Porges?" "Oh yes, but suppose the beautiful princess didn't open the door. What would you do if you were really a wandering knight who was waiting patiently for it to open? What would you do then?" "Shin up a tree, my Porges." "Oh, but that wouldn't be a bit right, would it, Auntie?" "Of course not," laughed Anthea. "It would be most unknightlike and very undignified." "Besides," added Small Porges, "you couldn't climb up a tree in your armor, you know." "Then I'd make an awful good try at it," nodded Bellew. "No," said Small Porges, shaking his head. "Shall I tell you what you ought to do?" "Well then, you draw your two-edged sword and dress your shield, like Gareth the kitchen knave did. He was always dressing his shield, and so was Lancelot. And you'd fight all those dragons and kill them, and cut their heads off." "And then what would happen?" inquired Bellew. "Why, then the lovely princess would open the gate and marry you, of course, and live happily ever after, and all would be revelry and joy." "Ah," sighed Bellew, "if she'd do that, I think I'd fight all the dragons that ever roared, and kill them too. But supposing she, wouldn't open the gate?" "Why then," said Small Porges, wrinkling his brow, "why then, you'd have to storm the castle, of course, and break open the gate and run off with the princess on your charger, if she was very beautiful, you know." "A most excellent idea, my Porges. If I should happen to find myself in like circumstances, I'll surely take your advice." Now, as he spoke, Bellew glanced at Anthea, and she at him, and straightway she blushed, and then she laughed, and then she blushed again, and still blushing, rose to her feet, and turned, to find Mr. Cassilis within a yard of them.
"Ah, Miss Anthea,"
said he, lifting his hat.
"I sent Georgie to find you, but it seems he forgot to mention that I was waiting."
"I'm awful sorry, Mr. Cassilis, but Uncle Porges was telling us about dragons, you know."
Small Porges hastened to explain.
"Dragons,"
repeated Mr. Cassilis with his supercilious smile.
"Ah, indeed, dragons should be interesting, especially in such a very quiet, shady nook as this. Quite an idyllic place for storytelling. It's a positive shame to disturb you."
And his sharp white teeth gleamed beneath his mustache as he spoke, and he tapped his riding boot lightly with his hunting crop as he fronted Bellew, who had risen, and stood bare-armed, leaning upon his pitchfork, and, as in their first meeting, there was a mute antagonism in their look.
"Let me introduce you to each other,"
said Anthea, conscious of this attitude. "Mr. Cassilis of Brampton Court, Mr. Bellew, of nowhere in particular, sir," added Bellew.
"And pray,"
said Mr. Cassilis perfunctorily, as they strolled on across the meadow,
"how do you like Dapplemere, Mr. Bellew?"
"Immensely, sir, beyond all expression."
"Yes, it is considered rather pretty, I believe."
"Lovely, sir," nodded Bellew, "though it is not so much the beauty of the place itself that appeals to me so much as what it contains."
"Oh, indeed,"
said Mr. Cassilis with a sudden sharp glance.
"To what do you refer?"
"Gooseberries, sir."
"I, beg your pardon?"
"Sir," said Bellew gravely, "all my life I have fostered a secret passion for gooseberries. Raw or cooked, in pie, pudding, or jam, they are equally alluring. Unhappily, the American gooseberry is but a hollow mockery at best."
"Ha?"
said Mr. Cassilis dubiously. "Now, in gooseberries, as in everything else, sir, there is to be found the superlative, the quintessence, the ideal. Consequently, I have roamed east and west, and north and south in quest of it."
"Really?"
said Mr. Cassilis, stifling a yawn, and turning towards Miss Anthea with the very slightest shrug of his shoulders. "And in Dapplemere," concluded Bellew solemnly, "I have, at last, found my ideal." "Gooseberry," added Anthea with a laugh in her eyes. "Arcadia, being a land of ideals," nodded Bellew.
"Ideals," said Mr. Cassilis, caressing his moustache. "Ideals and, gooseberries, though probably excellent things in themselves, are apt to pall upon one in time. Personally, I find them equally insipid."
"Of course, it is all a matter of taste," sighed Bellew.
"But,"
Mr. Cassilis went on, fairly turning his back upon him,
"the subject I wished to discuss with you, Miss Anthea, was the, approaching sale."
"The sale," she repeated, all the brightness dying out of her face.
"I wished,"
said Cassilis, leaning nearer to her, and lowering his voice confidentially,
"to try to convince you how unnecessary it would be, if—"
and he paused significantly. Anthea turned quickly aside, as though to hide her mortification from Bellew's keen eyes, whereupon he, seeing it all, became straightway more dreamy than ever, and, laying a hand upon Small Porges' shoulder, pointed with his pitchfork to where, at the other end of the 5 acre, the haymakers worked away as merrily as ever.
"Come, my Porges," said he, "let us away, and join yon happy throng, and,
with Daphnis and Chloe and Blowsabel, we'll list to the, cuckoo in the dell." So, hand in hand, the two Porges set off together, but when they had gone some distance, Bellew looked back, and then he saw that Anthea walked with her head averted, yet Cassilis walked close beside her, and stooped now and then, until the black moustache came very near the curl, that curl of wanton witchery that peeped above her ear.
"Uncle Porges, why do you frown so?"
"Frown, my Porges? Did I? Well, I was thinking."
"Well, I'm thinking too, only I don't frown, you know, but I'm thinking just the same."
"And what might you be thinking, nephew?"
"Why, I was thinking that although you're so awful fond of gooseberries, and though there's lots of ripe ones on the bushes, I've never seen you eat a single one."
End of chapter 9.
Chapter 10 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 10. How Bellew and Adam entered into a solemn league and covenant.
"Look at the moon tonight, Uncle Porges."
"I see it."
"It's awful big and round, isn't it?"
"Yes, it's very big and very round."
"And rather yellow, isn't it?"
"Very yellow."
"Just like a great big golden sovereign, isn't it?"
"Very much like a sovereign, my Porges."
"Well, do you know, I was wondering if there was any chance that it was a money moon."
They were leaning out at the lattice, Small Porges and Big Porges. Anthea and Miss Priscilla were busied upon household matters wholly feminine, wherefore Small Porges had drawn Bellew to the window, and there they leaned, the small body enfolded by Bellew's long arm, and the two faces turned up to the silvery splendor of the moon. But now, Anthea came up behind them, and, not noticing the position of Bellew's arm as she leaned on the other side of Small Porges, it befell that her hand touched, and, for a moment, rested upon Bellew's hand, hidden as it was in the shadow. And this, probably, began it. The air of Arcadia, as has been said before, is an intoxicating air, but it is more. It is an air charged with a subtle magic whereby the commonest objects, losing their prosaic, matter-of-fact shapes, become transfigured into things of wonder and delight, little things that pass as mere ordinary commonplaces,
things insignificant and wholly beneath notice in the everyday world, become fraught with such infinite meaning, and may hold such sublime, such undreamed of possibilities, here in Arcadia. Thus, when it is recorded that Anthea's hand accidentally touched and rested upon Bellu's, the significance of it will become at once apparent. "And pray," said Anthea, laying that same hand in the most natural manner in the world upon the Small Porges' curls, "pray, what might you two be discussing so very solemnly?" "The moon," answered Small Porges. "I was wondering if it was a money moon, and Uncle Porges hasn't said if it is yet." "Why no, old chap," answered Bellew, "I'm afraid not." "And pray," said Anthea again, "what might a money moon be?" "Well," explained Small Porges, "when the moon's just so, then you go out and find a fortune, you know. But the moon's got to be a money moon, and you've got to know, you know, else you'll find nothing, of course." "Ah, Georgy dear," sighed Anthea, stooping her dark head down to his golden curls, "don't you know that fortunes are very hard to get, and that they have to be worked for, and that no one ever found one without a great deal of labor, and sorrow?" "Of course, everyone can't find fortunes, Auntie Anthea, I know that, but we shall. My Uncle Porges knows all about it, you see, and I know that we shall. I'm sure as sure we shall find one some day, 'cause, you see, I put it in my prayers now, at the end, you know. I say, 'And please help me and my Uncle Porges to find a fortune when the money moon comes. A big one, world without end, amen.' So you see, it's all right, and we're just waiting till the money moon comes, aren't we, Uncle Porges?" "Yes, old chap, yes," nodded Bellew, "until the money moon comes." And so there fell a silence between them, yet a silence that held a wondrous charm of its own. A silence that lasted so long that the coppery curls drooped lower and lower upon Bellew's arm, until Anthea, sighing, rose, and in a very tender voice bade Small Porges say good night, the which he did, forthwith, slumberous of voice, and sleepy-eyed, and so, with his hand in Anthea's, went drowsily up to bed. Wherefore, seeing that Miss Priscilla had bustled away into the kitchen, Bellew sauntered out into the rose garden to look upon the beauty of the night. The warm air was fragrant with dewy scents, and the moon, already high above the tree tops, poured down their gentle radiance upon the quaint, old garden with its winding walks, and clipped yew hedges, while upon the quiet, from the dim shadow of the distant woods, stole the soft, sweet song of a nightingale. Bellew walked a path bordered with flowers, and checkered with silver patches of moonlight, drinking in the thousand beauties about him, staring up at the glory of the moon, the indigo of the sky, and listening to the voice of the lonely singer in the wood. And yet it was of none of these he was thinking as he paused under the shadow of King Arthur, nor of Small Porges, nor of anyone or anything in this world, but only of the sudden, light touch of a warm, soft hand upon his. "Be that you, sir?" Bellew started, and now he found that he had been sitting all this while with an empty pipe between his teeth, yet content therewith, wherefore he shook his head, and wondered. "Be that you, Mr. Bellew, sir?" "Yes, Adam, it is I." "Ah, and how might you be feeling now, arter your exercise with the pitchfork, sir?" "Very fit, I thank you, Adam. Sit down and smoke, and let us converse together." "Why, thankee, sir," answered Adam, producing the small black clay pipe from his waistcoat pocket, and accepting Bellew's proffered pouch. "I've been up to the house a visitin' Prudence the cook, and a rare cook she be, too, Mr. Bellew, sir." "And a rare buxom girl into the bargain, Adam." "Oh, ah! Well, she's well enough, sir, I won't go for to deny as she's a fine, upstanding, well-shaped, tall, and proper figure of a woman as ever was, sir, though the Kentish lasses be a tidy lot, Mr. Bellew, sir. But Lord, when you come to think of her gift of Yorkshire puddin', likewise jam rollers and seed cakes, which, though mentioned last, ain't by no manner of means least, when you come to think of her brew o' ale, and cider, and ginger wine, why then, I'm took, sir. I'm took altogether, and the old Adam inside of me works himself into such a state that if another chap, especially that there Job Jagway, gets looking her way, and too often, why, it's got to get took out of him, or took out of me in good hard knocks, Mr. Bellew, sir. And when are you going to get married, Adam? Well, sir, we was thinking that if Miss Anthea has a good season, this year, we'd get it over and done with sometime in October, sir. But it's all according to what? To the ops, sir. The HOPS, ops, sir. They're coming on fine. Scrumptious they be. If they don't take the blight, sir, they'll be the finest ops this side of Maidstone. But then, if they do take the blight, why then, my opes is blighted likewise, sir. B-L-I-T-E-D, blighted, Mr. Bellew, sir. Which said, Adam laughed once, nodded his head several times, and relapsed into puffing silence. Mr. Cassilis was over today, Adam, said Bellew, after a while pursuing a train of thought. Ah, sir, I seen him. He also seen me. He told me as Job Jagway was up and about again. Likewise, Job Jagway will be over here tomorrow, along with the rest of 'em, for the sale, sir. Ah, yes, the sale, said Bellew, thoughtfully. To think of that there Job Jagway a-comin' over here to buy Miss Anthea's furniture, do set the old Adam a-workin' inside of me to that amazing extent as I can't sit still, Mr. Bellew, sir. And if that there Job crosses my path tomorrow, well, let him. Look out, that's all. Saying which, Adam doubled up a huge knotted fist, and shook it at an imaginary Job. Adam, said Bellew in the same thoughtful tone, I wonder if you would do something for me. Anything you ask me, sir, so long as you don't want me to. I want you to buy some of that furniture for me. What? Exclaimed Adam, and vented his great laugh again. Well, if that ain't a good 'un, sir, why that's just what I'm a-going to do. You see, I ain't what you might call a rich cove, nor yet a millionaire, but I've got a bit put by, and I drawed out £10 yesterday. Thinks I, here's to save Miss Anthea's old sideboard, or the mirror as she's so fond of, or if not, why then a chair or so. They ain't a-going to get it all, not while I've got £1 or two, I says to myself. Adam, said Bellew, turning suddenly, that sentiment does you credit. That sentiment makes me proud to have knocked you into a ditch. Shake hands, Adam. And there, beneath the great apple tree, while the moon looked on, they very solemnly shook hands. And now, Adam, pursued Bellew, I want you to put back your £10. Keep it for prudence, because I happen to have rather more than we shall want. See here. And with the words, Bellew took out a leather wallet, and from this wallet, money and banknotes. More money and more banknotes than Adam had ever beheld in all his 30-odd years, at sight of which his eyes opened, and his square jaw relaxed, to the imminent danger of his cherished clay pipe. I want you to take this, Bellew went on, counting a sum into Adam's nerveless hand, and tomorrow, when the sale begins, if anyone makes a bid for anything, I want you to bid higher, and no matter what, you must always buy. Always, you understand. But, sir, that there old drawing-room cabinet with the carvings, buy it. And the silver candlesticks, and the four-post bedstead, and the... Buy 'em, Adam, buy everything. If we haven't enough money, there's plenty more where this came from. Only buy. You understand? Oh, yes, sir, I understand. How much have you give me? Why, here's 45, 50, 60. Lord! Put it away, Adam. Forget all about it till tomorrow. And not a word, mind. £100! gasped Adam. Lord! Oh, I won't speak of it, trust me, Mr. Bellew, sir. But to think of me a-walking about with £100 in my pocket, Lord! I won't say nothing, but to think of old Adam with £100 in his pocket, ecod, it do seem that comical. Saying which, Adam buttoned the money into a capacious pocket, slapped it, nodded, and rose. Well, sir, I'll be going. There'll be Miss Anthea in the garden yonder.
and if she was to see me now, there's no saying but I should be took a-laughing to think of this 'ere £100. Miss Anthea, where? Coming through the rose garden. She be off to see old Mother Dibbin. They call Mother Dibbin a witch, and now, as she's down with the rheumatics, there ain't nobody to look after her, except Miss Anthea. She'd ha' starved afore now if it hadn't been for Miss Anthea, but Lord love your eyes and limbs, Mr. Bellew, sir. Miss Anthea don't care if she's a witch, or 50 witches, not she. So, good night, Mr. Bellew, sir, and mum's the word." Saying which, Adam slapped his pocket again, nodded, winked, and went upon his way. End of chapter 10.
Chapter 11 of The Money Moon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 11 of The Man with the Tiger Mark. It is a moot question as to whether a curl can be more alluring when it glows beneath the fiery kisses of the sun, or shines demurely in the tender radiance of the moon. As Bellew looked at it now, that same small curl that nodded and beckoned to him above Anthea's left ear, he strongly inclined to the latter opinion. "Adam tells me that you are going out, Miss Anthea." "Only as far as Mrs. Dibbin's cottage, just across the meadow." "Adam also informs me that Mrs. Dibbin is a witch." "People call her so." "Never in all my days have I seen a genuine old witch, so I'll come with you, if I may." "Oh, this is a very gentle old witch, and she is neither humpback, nor does she ride a broomstick, and so I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, Mr. Bellew." "Then, at least, I can carry your basket, allow me." And so, in his quiet, masterful fashion, he took the basket from her arm, and walked on beside her, through the orchard. "What a glorious night it is!" exclaimed Anthea suddenly, drawing a deep breath of the fragrant air. "Oh, it is good to be alive! In spite of all the cares and worries, life is very sweet." After this, they walked on some distance in silence, she gazing wistfully upon the beauties of the familiar world about her, while he watched the curl above her ear until she, becoming aware of it all at once, promptly sent it back into retirement, with a quick, deft little pat of her fingers. "I hope," said Bellew at last, "I do sincerely hope that you tucked up my nephew safe in bed, you see." "Your nephew, indeed." "Well, our nephew, then. I ask, because he tells me that he can't possibly sleep, unless you go to tuck him up, and I can quite believe it. Do you know, Mr. Bellew, I'm growing quite jealous of you. He can't move a step without you, and he is forever talking and lauding your numberless virtues." "But then, I'm only an uncle after all, and if he talks of me to you, well, he talks of you to me, all day long." "Oh, does he?" "And, among other things, he told me that I ought to see you when your hair is down and all about you." "Oh!" exclaimed Anthea. "Indeed, our nephew is much luckier than I, because I never had an aunt of my own to come and tuck me up at night, with her hair hanging all about her, like a beautiful cloak. So, you see, I have no boyish recollections to go upon, but I think I can imagine—" "And what do you think of the Sergeant?" Anthea inquired, changing the subject abruptly. "I like him so much that I'm going to take him at his word, and call upon him at the first opportunity." "Did Aunt Priscilla tell you that he comes marching along regularly every day, at exactly the same hour?" "Yes, to see how the peaches are getting on," nodded Bellew. "For such a very brave soldier, he is a dreadful coward," said Anthea, smiling. "It has taken him 5 years to screw up enough courage to tell her that she's uncommonly young for her age, and yet, I think it is just that diffidence that makes him so lovable. And he is so simple and so gentle in spite of all his war medals. When I am moody and cross, the very sight of him is enough to put me in humour again. He has never spoken to Miss Priscilla?"
Never, though of course she knows, and has done from the very first. I asked him once why he had never told her what it was brought him so regularly to look at the peaches, and he said, in his quick, sharp way, "Miss Anthea, can't be done, ma'am. A poor battered old soldier, only one arm. No, ma'am."
"I wondered if one could find just such another sergeant outside Arcadia," said Bellew. "I wonder." Now, they were approaching a stile towards which Bellew had directed his eyes from time to time, as, for that matter, curiously enough, had Anthea, but to him it seemed that it never would be reached, while to her it seemed that it would be reached much too soon. Therefore, she began to rack her mind, trying to remember some gate or any gap in the hedge that should obviate the necessity of climbing it. But before she could recall any such gate or gap, they were at the stile, and Bellew, leaping over, had set down the basket, and stretched out his hand to aid her over. But Anthea, tall and lithe, active and vigorous with her outdoor life, and used to such things from her infancy, stood a moment hesitating. To be sure, the stile was rather high, yet she could have vaulted it nearly, if not quite, as easily as Bellew himself, had she been alone. But then, she was not alone. Moreover, be it remembered, this was in Arcadia of a midsummer night. Thus, she hesitated, only a moment, it is true, for, seeing the quizzical look in his eyes that always made her vaguely rebellious, with a quick, light movement, she mounted the stile, and there paused to shake her head in laughing disdain of his outstretched hand. Then there was the sound of rending cambric. She tripped, and next moment he had caught her in his arms. It was for but a very brief instant that she lay, soft and yielding, in his embrace, yet she was conscious of how strong were the arms that held her so easily ere they set her down. "I beg your pardon, how awkward I am!" she exclaimed in hot mortification. "No," said Bellew, shaking his head, "it was a nail, you know, a bent and rusty nail, here, under the top bar. Is your dress much torn?" "Oh, that is nothing, thank you." So they went on again, but now they were silent once more, and very naturally, for Anthea was mightily angry, with herself, the stile, Bellew, and everything concerned, while he was thinking of the sudden warm clasp of her arms, of the alluring fragrance of her hair, and of the shy droop of her lashes as she lay in his embrace. Therefore, as he walked on beside her, saying nothing, within his secret soul he poured benedictions upon the head of that bent and rusty nail. And presently, having turned down a grassy lane, and crossed a small but very noisy brook that chattered impertinences among the stones, and chuckled at them slyly from the shadows, they eventually came upon a small and very lonely little cottage, bowered in roses and honeysuckle, as are all the cottages hereabouts. But now Anthea paused, looking at Bellew with a dubious brow. "I ought to warn you that Mrs. Dibbin is very old, and sometimes a little queer, and sometimes says very surprising things." "Excellent!" nodded Bellew, holding the little gate open for her. "Very right and proper conduct in a witch, and I love surprises above all things." But Anthea still hesitated, while Bellew stood with his hand upon the gate, waiting for her to enter. Now he had left his hat behind him, and, as the moon shone down on his bare head, she could not but notice how bright and yellow was his hair, despite the thick black brows below. "I think I would rather you waited outside, if you don't mind, Mr. Bellew." "You mean that I am to be denied the joy of conversing with a real live old witch, and having my fortune told?" He sighed. "Well, if such is your will, so be it," said he obediently, and handed her the basket. "I won't keep you waiting very long, and thank you." she smiled, and, hurrying up the narrow path, she tapped at the cottage door. "Come in! Come in!" cried an old, quavering voice, albeit very sharp and piercing. "That be my own soft dove of a maid, my proud, beautiful white lady. Come in, and bring him with you. Him as is so big and strong, him as I've expected so long, the tall, golden man from overseas. Bid him come in, Miss Anthea, that Goody Dibbin's old eyes may look at him at last." Hereupon, at a sign from Anthea, Bellew turned in at the gate, and, striding up the path, entered the cottage. Despite the season, a fire burned upon the hearth, and, crouched over this, in a great elbow chair, sat a very bent and aged woman. Her face was furrowed, and seamed with numberless lines and wrinkles, but her eyes were still bright, and she wore no spectacles. Likewise, her white hair was wonderfully thick and abundant, as could plainly be seen beneath the frill of her cap, for, like the very small room of this very small cottage, she was extremely neat and tidy. She had a great, curving nose, and a great curving chin, and what with this and her bright black eyes, and stooping figure, she was very much like what a witch should be, albeit a very superior kind of a witch. She sat for a while, staring up at Bellew, who stood tall and bareheaded, smiling down at her, and then, all at once, she nodded her head 3 several and distinct times. "Right!" she quavered. "Right! Right! It be all right! The golden man as I've watched this many a day, with the curly hair, and the sleepy eye, and the tiger mark upon his arm. Right! Right!" "What do you mean by tiger mark?" inquired Bellew. "I mean, young master with your golden curls, I mean as, sitting here day in and day out, staring down into my fire, I has my dreams. Leastways, I calls 'em my dreams, though there's them as calls it the second sight. But pray sit down, tall sir, on the stool there, and you, my tender maid, my dark lady, come you here, upon my right, and if you wish, I'll look into the ink, or knead your pretty hand, or tell you what I see down there in the fire. But no, first show what you have brought for old Nanny in the blessed basket, the fine, strong basket as holds so much. Yes, set it down here, where I can open it myself, tall sir. Eh, what's this? Oh, tea! Oh, God bless you for the tea, my dear, and eggs, and butter, and a cold chicken. The Lord bless your kind heart, Miss Anthea. Oh, my proud lady, happy the man who shall win ye, happy the man who shall wed ye, my dark, beautiful maid. And strong must he be, aye, and masterful he who shall wake the love light in those dark, great, passionate eyes of yours. And there is no man in all this world can do it, but he must be a golden man, with a tiger mark upon him. Why, oh, Nanny! Aye, blush if you will, my dark lady, but Mother Dibbin knows she's seen it in the fire, dreamed it in her dreams, and read it in the ink. The path lies very darker for ye, my lady. Aye, very dark it be, and full of cares and troubles. But there's the sun shining beyond, bright and golden. You be proud, and high, and scornful, my lady. 'Tis in your blood. You need a strong hand to guide ye, and the strong hand shall come. By force you shall be wooed, and by force you shall be wed, and there be no man strong enough to woo and wed ye, but him as I've told ye of, him as bears the tiger mark." "But, Nanny," said Anthea again, gently interrupting her, and patting the old woman's shriveled hand, "you're forgetting the basket. You haven't found all we've brought you yet."
Aye, nodded old Nanny, the fine strong basket. Let's see what more be in the good kind basket. Here's bread, and sugar, and a pound of your favourite tobacco, said Anthea with a smiling nod. Oh, the good weed, the blessed weed, cried the old woman, clutching the package with trembling fingers. Ah, who can tell the comfort it has been to me the long, long days, and the long, long nights, the blessed weed, when I've sat here a-looking and a-looking into the fire. Oh, God bless you, my sweet maid, for your kindly thought. And, with a sudden gesture, she caught Anthea's hand to her lips, and then, just as suddenly, turned upon Bellew. And now, tall sir, can I do aught for ye? Shall I look into the fire for ye, or the ink, or read your hand? Why, yes, answered Bellew, stretching out his hand to her. You shall tell me two things, if you will. First, shall one ever find his way into the Castle of Heart's Desire? And secondly, when? Oh, but I don't need to look into her hand to tell you that, tall sir, nor yet in the ink, or in the fire, for I've dreamed it all in my dreams. And now, see you, 'tis a strong place, this castle, with thick doors, and great locks and bars. But I've seen those doors broke down, those great locks and bars burst asunder. But there is none can do this but him as bears the tiger mark. So much for the first, and for the second. Happiness shall come riding to you on the full moon. But you must reach up, and take it for yourself, if you be tall enough. And even you are not tall enough to do that, Mr. Bellew, laughed Anthea as she rose to bid old Nanny good night, while Bellew, unnoticed, slipped certain coins upon a corner of the chimney-piece. So old Nanny blessed them, and theirs, past, present, and future, thoroughly and completely, with a fine comprehensiveness that only a genuinely accomplished old witch might hope to attain to, and, following them to the door, paused there with one shriveled, claw-like hand uplifted towards the sky. At the full of the moon, tall sir, she repeated, at the full of the moon. As for you, my dark-eyed lady, I say, by force you shall be wooed, and by force you shall be wed, aye, aye. But there is no man strong enough except he have the tiger mark upon him. Old Nanny knows, she's seen it in the ink, dreamed it in the fire, and read it all in your pretty hand. And now, thank ye for the tea, my pretty, and God bless ye for the good weed, and just so sure as you've been good and kind to old Nanny, so shall fortune be good and kind to you, Miss Anthea. Poor old Nanny, said Anthea, as they went on down the grassy lane. She is so very grateful for so little, and she is such a gentle old creature, really, though the country folk do call her a witch, and are afraid of her because they say she has the evil eye, which is ridiculous, of course, but nobody ever goes near her, and she is dreadfully lonely, poor old thing. And so that is why you come to sit with her, and let her talk to you? inquired Bellew, staring up at the moon. Yes. And do you believe in her dreams and visions? No, of course not, answered Anthea rather hurriedly, and with a deeper colour in her cheeks, though Bellew was still intent upon the moon. You don't either, do you? she inquired, seeing he was silent. Well, I don't quite know, he answered slowly, but she is rather a wonderful old lady, I think. Yes, she has wonderful thick hair still, nodded Anthea, and she's not a bit deaf, and her eyes are as clear and sharp as ever they were. Yes, but I wasn't meaning her eyes, or her hair, or her hearing. Oh, then pray what were you pleased to mean?
did you happen to notice what she said about a, man with a tiger mark?" inquired Bellew, still gazing up at the moon.
Anthea laughed.
"The man with a tiger mark! Of course. He has been much in her dreams lately, and she has talked of him a great deal." "Has she?" said Bellew. "Ha! Yes, her mind is full of strange twists and fancies. You see, she is so very old, and she loves to tell me her dreams, and read the future for me." "Though, of course, you don't believe it," said Bellew. "Believe it?" Anthea repeated, and walked some dozen paces or so before she answered. "No, of course not." "Then, none of your fortune, nothing she told you has ever come true?" Once more Anthea hesitated, this time so long that Bellew turned from his moon-gazing to look at her. "I mean," he went on, "has none of it ever come true? About this man with the tiger mark, for instance?" "No, oh no," answered Anthea rather hastily, and laughed again. "Old Nanny has seen him in her dreams, everywhere, in India, in Africa, in China, in hot countries, in cold countries. Oh, Nanny has seen him everywhere, but I have seen him nowhere, and of course, I never shall." "Ah!" said Bellew. "And she reads him always in your fortune, does she?" "And I listen very patiently," Anthea nodded, "because it pleases her so much. And it is all so very harmless after all, isn't it?" "Yes," answered Bellew, "and very wonderful." "Wonderful? Poor old Nanny's fancies? What do you mean by wonderful?" "Upon my word, I hardly know," said Bellew, shaking his head, "but there are more things in heaven and earth, etc., you know. And this is one of them." "Really? Now you grow mysterious, Mr. Bellew." "Like the night," he answered, turning to aid her across the impertinent brook that chuckled at them, and laughed after them, as only such a very impertinent brook possibly could. So betimes they reached the stile, and crossed it, this time without mishap, despite the lurking nail, and, all too soon for Bellew, had traversed the orchard, and were come to the garden where the roses all hung so still upon their stems that they might have been asleep, and filling the air with the perfume of their dreams. And here they paused, perhaps because of the witchery of the moon, perhaps to listen to the voice of the nightingale, who sang on more gloriously than ever. Yet, though they stood so close together, their glances seldom met, and they were very silent. But at last, as though making up her mind, Anthea spoke. "What did you mean when you said old Nanny's dreams were so wonderful?" she asked. "I'll show you," he answered, and while he spoke, slipped off his coat, and drawing up his shirt sleeve, held out a muscular white arm towards her. He held it out in the full radiance of the moon, and thus, looking down at it, her eyes grew suddenly wide, and her breath caught strangely as surprise gave place to something else, for there, plain to be seen upon the white flesh, were 3 long scars that wound up from elbow to shoulder. And so, for a while, they stood thus, she looking at his arm, and he at her. "Why," she said at last, finding voice in a little gasp, "why, then—" "I am the man with the tiger mark," he said, smiling his slow, placid smile. Now, as his eyes looked down into hers, she flushed sudden and hot, and her glance wavered, and fell beneath his. "Oh!" she cried, and with the word, turned about, and fled from him into the house. End of chapter 11.